Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historical shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area. We recognize these original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda, just to note that there will be an addition to the agenda under Parks, Recreation and Trails, a discussion about remuneration for Santa for the tree lighting events. So having said that, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda for today? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that the November 16th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Hearing none. Just a comment for those in the audience and for those who are listening. We are having some technical difficulties today with our agenda. And so we may have to break to resolve issues. I'm hoping that everything will go smoothly, but just so everybody's aware. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of October 31st special meeting and the regular meeting on November the 2nd? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved the October 31st, 2023 special and November 2nd, 2023 regular council meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no public meetings, so we'll move into the delegations. And we will start with Shelley Fellows and Peter Dadzis from the Halls Hawks area, talking about the proposed replacement plan for the transfer station or the landfill station.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Mayor, members of council, representatives from administration who I can't see, but I'm assuming they are in the room. Thank you for allowing us to speak to you today. A particular note of thanks to Don Newhook, who facilitated our delegation via Zoom, as neither myself nor my co-presenter, Peter Dadzis, are able to be present in person today. We're representing, as you noted, Madam Mayor, the residents and cottagers on and around Big Hawk, Halls, and Little Hawk Lakes. We're a community working group formed upon receipt of the report regarding the options for waste collection in the Halls and Hawk Lakes area prepared by Cambium for Algonquin Highlands Council. As part of that process, we reached out to our neighbors and fellow property owners in the Halls and Hawk Lakes area via survey. Today, we'd like, hang on here, I need to flip to my next screen. Could I get the next slide? Thank you. Today, we'd like to talk trash with you. We have prepared a brief presentation outlining the requests we have regarding waste disposal in the area, and included in our package a report detailing the results and comments from that survey. What we will not be talking about today are some of the options outlined by Cambium. As I'm also president of the Halls Hawk Lake Property Owners Association, I can confirm that the association has zero interest to operate a waste disposal facility. We also don't feel that unsupervised dumpsters are a viable option, nor is curbside collection or a business managed collection point. What we are going to discuss today is why the status quo is also not the best option going forward, and what the community has strongly endorsed a transfer station. It should be noted that the option of satellite collection points outlined in the report, similar to the recent presentation to Council by Muskoka, is not dealt with in our presentation nor in our survey. However, we're happy to answer questions about why we feel it's not a sustainable long-term option. Next slide, please. Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, and if I could be unmuted and made visible. Otherwise,
You
it's a...
We can hear
I
you,
am.
Peter.
I am. Well, good morning, councillors. Thank you very much for taking this very, very important subject seriously once again. And for some of you, you might recall that during August of 2019, after the annual general meeting of the Halls-Hawk Lake Association, where we were informed as a group that there was going to be a potential discussion, a council at the time about the Hawk waste disposal site. Now, I think it's all very important for us to remember that everybody who is around Algonquin Highlands knew that the landfill aspects of the Hawk waste disposal site would have to come to an end. And no one has ever disputed that that is what is on discussion. What is on discussion was, at the time, the idea of using it as it had been configured as a transfer station. And so just as a reminder of the footprint that this group represents, the two Hawk Lakes, if you look at the composition of the ratepayers up there, you have out of 310 cottagers, you have the vast majority of them are water access. So if you think of those as your constituents who do create trash, when we went out there and had a survey, we had 210 respondents, and 92% of these ratepayers who responded to us were in favor of keeping the Hawk WDS as a transfer station. So today we are just carrying on what was at that time a very heightened concern that something was being taken away from the services that everyone rightly sees as being the responsibility of our local municipality. So, Shelley?
Next slide, please. All right, so our most recent survey, Peter's referring to one that was done just prior to the closure of the Hawk Lake waste disposal site. Our most recent survey, we still have about 90% of residents who would either be very likely or somewhat likely, because I want to use the language of the survey here, to use a transfer station at the former Hawk Lake dump site if it was reopened. We asked them the same question in a slightly different way because we really wanted to understand that. And so still a very strong 88% said that they would be very strongly, again, the wording of the question, in favor of reopening the former Hawk Lake site as a waste disposal facility. So we've had experience now for a few years in traveling to primarily Maple Lake dump to dispose of our waste. So why would we want to go back to the Hawk Lake site? Longer drive times, higher costs due to the greater distance. Fuel is exceedingly expensive right now. Increased carbon footprint, again, due to having to drive to Maple Lake, that longer drive time. About 83% of our survey respondents felt that the waste disposal services provided by Algonquin Highlands were decreased. So it was a decrease in service when the Hawk Lake site was closed. They're also concerned about safety along North Shore Road and St. Peter's Road due to the increased traffic. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we're using primarily the Maple Lake site as our waste disposal facility right now? Again, we asked that question in the survey. Mostly Maple Lake, some to Pine Springs, location basically dictating that. However, and I used the word shockingly in the presentation, when you calculate the numbers, about a third of people are taking their garbage home. So when you think of it, you think, well, that's not such a bad thing. They're taking their garbage home. It's not going in our landfill facility. However, imagine a third of, let's say, the households in the Halls Hawk Lake area, so 600 odd households, now 200 people suddenly bringing their garbage every week back to the Algonquin Highlands for disposal. That's a significant volume of garbage. And really, municipalities operate from the perspective of you dispose of the waste where you create the waste. That's part of our bargain. One thing that we didn't ask, because we didn't know if we would get honest answers to this one, is, are you dropping your waste at the side of the road? So we didn't ask that question. However, anecdotally, from people who are walking the various roads in our area, Big Hawk, Little Hawk, Braylock Road in particular, they are finding greater numbers of bags thrown at the side of the road. Next slide, please. And over to you, Peter.
Thank you. All right. So what's sort of the big picture here? Well, clearly, what is the notion of trash, municipal services is still top of mind. It's not an issue that has gone away. It's actually quite a bit of a discussion. And interestingly enough, we asked this question, and I think it's very important for the councillors that you understand that this is an issue that people feel that they want to be heard on. And if you recall, last fall, there was a municipal election, and the one of the key platforms of the Ward 2 councillors who put their hands up as candidates, Sabrina, Napier, Amber, and Lisa at the time, she was kind of in favor of status quo. But this, my point being, was a defined issue that all these candidates, the three I mentioned, would look to with support and work towards reopening the Hawk as a transfer station. And so if you add up the votes that were given into the Ward 2 area, 71% of the votes, all right, 1,945 votes of 2,743. In other words, ratepayers were saying, hey, we want this as an issue to be addressed by the incoming councillors. And the mayoral candidates, Liz and Mike Lang, well, Mike Lang, he lost, but he lost by, he had 47% of the votes, but he was on record as saying he would work to get it reopened. And so I think it's very important as a group there that you as councillors are actively listening to what your constituents, what your ratepayers, the people who you are there to support, are what are asking you. Okay, so next slide, please. All right, so you could see in the comments that if you had the time, I know you guys are all, gals are all very busy, but, you know, folks basically were, you know, saying ill-conceived, disappointed, there's frustration, and what is currently the status quo, you can see the comments. And so I have just some thoughts. I just reinforced this notion that if you put up your hand to represent people, then you have to listen to them. And I think, you know, the fact that we're on the agenda today, that you're taking it seriously, I take that as a very strong and positive good faith signal. And I also go to push a little bit that as councillors, you are there to work and on behalf of us as ratepayers with a fiduciary responsibility to
Peter, if you don't mind, if you wouldn't mind carrying on with your presentation as opposed to telling us what our responsibilities are, I think we're pretty well aware of that.
No, fair enough. fair enough, Liz, but this is our moment to say that, for instance, the staff report that came in, if it was Peter Dadzis, president of companies I was, or president of a condo board in Florida, I'd say, well, thanks very much, but what other options do you have? So number one is that there's an $8.7 million reserve that's available for Algonquin Highlands Township. 5% of that would cover whatever costs, capital costs, that would be required to put together something for the Hawks. So there's a responsibility to listen to us as ratepayers. There is a responsibility for the council to, I think, to accept staff reports, but also to say, hey, is there other ways that we could do this? And the last one is, we believe that there is the financial means for you as councillors to, if you will, underwrite this as an activity. Okay, Shelley.
Thank you, Peter. Next slide, please. So those three keywords that were taken from each of the sort of sets of comments, you do have the full list of comments at the end of the survey report. We felt it was important to include them. And I have to say, we removed about 4 who had no relation to the topic at hand. But we felt it was important to include them in the interest of being completely transparent and allowing council and administration to get a sense from the residents in their own words. And all we said was, do you have any other comments? So hopefully it was interesting reading for you. There is good news. So we're talking about the negative, but there is good news, because not everyone is in favor of reopening the dump. 12% of respondents said they're very satisfied with municipal services. We said that 88% they said they weren't, 12% said they are. So this is an opportunity, as we feel, with reopening a facility, a garbage transfer station specifically, to demonstrate that council and administration are aligned with residents, do understand and hear their concerns, and are willing to take action upon that. We are patient. We asked the question in the survey about how, do you want this open now, or are you willing to wait? Cambium report outlined some processes that will require significant amounts of time. Are you willing to wait in order to do this properly? 2/3 said they are. Next slide, please. This is our concluding slide. So what we're hoping for in the next 3 years, which is the time frame that was outlined by Cambium, we'd like to see, again, as demonstration of that alignment with the residents and cottagers in the Halls and Hawk Lake area, we'd like to see a joint committee, a working group established for collaboration between council, administration, and the property owners, so that we can make sure that our concerns and needs are being brought forward, and that we're also able to effectively communicate that back to our neighbors and fellow ratepayers. We'd like to see approval in principle to reopen the former Hawk Lake site as a transfer station. However, we feel, as Peter was alluding to, that the costs estimated in the Cambium report, which was a high-level report, that those costs are narrowed down on, and we're able to attack it with a sharpened pencil to make sure that we're making the most effective use of an investment into capital assets. Complete that process in the interim of applying for all the necessary permits to either reopen the site or open a site at a new location within the Halls Hawk Lake footprint. And of course, develop an RFP based on the requirements, the timelines, and the needs, and get that out into the community for contractors and construction for the transfer station, and with a goal to completing everything and reopening the facility in 2026. So that concludes our presentation. I thank you for your patience. and your willingness to listen. So we now open the floor for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I do appreciate the work that your group has done on this, and the detail that you brought to us. I have to say I am a little bit disappointed that your working group has decided not to look at any of the other options that we had brought before us. And accepting the fact that the options and the pricing put beside some of the options were base estimates, not knowing just exactly what direction we were going to take. And, once we drilled down on any options that we decided we might follow, that we would have to do a much deeper dive on costing. I'm a little bit disappointed in some of the attitude that I can see in the delegation. I really believe that council, as Peter has pointed out, truly has listened to you. We've made a decision, and we did not make that decision lightly when we decided to close the landfill and invest more money into the Maple Lake landfill. That was not an easy decision to make, but council did make it, and after considerable discussion. And it's a dangerous slope to go down to reverse decisions that we've made in the past. And as you know, when we look at decisions like this, we've got to look at competing priorities. And a lot of the funding, although you've referred to funds that we have in reserve, a lot of those funds are earmarked for specific projects and things that we know that we're going to have to do going forward. It's interesting to see that there are still members in your catchment area that don't really understand why the waste management site was closed. And looking at comments about the reason the bridge was replaced was, in order to facilitate access to the landfill station. It's not our road, and that's not the reason why the bridge was replaced. That's part of an asset management program. Just to repeat that we will be considering your delegation, and I think that it's without wanting to repeat myself too much, it's obviously that council has listened to you, because we've agreed to go back and reconsider the options and look at what we may or may not be able to or be willing to do, considering what's in the best interest of the entire municipality as well as your catchment area. I think I'll leave it at that. One other comment I think I would make is that I'm sure you're aware we're not in full control of the timing of any of the options that we need to go through, because we have to work through the Ministry of the Environment and receive approvals should we decide that we are going to go ahead with what your request is. But I will turn comments over to council if you've got any specific comments or questions that you'd like to ask at this point.
Can I make one comment though, about excuse me for interrupting, Liz. So I think amongst the Algonquin Highland footprint for waste management, for those who have seen Pine Springs, okay? So Pine Springs is keep it simple. That is what, if you will, would be more than satisfactory in many people's minds as to what to be done. And that's 3 dumpsters with grade level platforms, nothing complex, nothing like, and so when Liz, you commented no other options. Well, one of the things that we did not see is somebody say, what about Pine Springs? And so if anybody's been up there, we had folks go up and take a look and says, holy smokes, this is straightforward, it's simple, and it's inexpensive. So I just wanted to register that the menu of options has to include what is existing already in the control of the municipality. So sorry if I interrupted.
I just want to clarify on that comment for council is that Pine Springs is still a landfill. We use the bins, but it is not a transfer station. It is a landfill. I just want to clarify that.
Questions, comments from council? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thanks for the delegation. And, I'm absolutely not surprised that people would like to see a return of waste management services. I'm not sure I really required a survey to confirm that. That was really loud and clear throughout the last few years. I was surprised to see that the other options were not that were in the Cambium report were not included in the survey, especially as, and I appreciate you didn't have this figure in advance, but 38% of people were even aware of that report. So I wonder if you would kindly comment on the process by which you decided to predetermine the absence of the other options in the survey, given that so many people were unaware of them. And I wonder if, if we went back today and said, oh, but here are some other possibilities, what they would say to those, because it's loud and clear that they want some form of services back.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so the need for a survey, let me speak to that one first, because I'm a numbers person. I certainly speak to a great deal of property owners in the region on a regular basis. But I think when we're representing the needs and perspective and position of a region, going to a survey is something that I think is necessary. However, if we would not have had strong participation, that to me would put the results of a survey not very would not place them in a position of very strong credibility. We did have 159 responses, so it was a strong response. And a great number of the respondents actually took the time to write comments, which is a little bit unusual. So I wanted us to have numbers. We felt that very strongly as a working group. We didn't want to just be a small group. We wanted to represent the concerns and will of the region. So first thing. Second thing, with respect to the options in the Cambium report, none of us are engineers. And certainly none of us are sanitary engineers. So we don't understand the nuances of the various waste disposal options that were in there. We could only look at them through the lens of users of the system. So as I noted earlier in my presentation, from a lake association perspective, which is the largest community organization for our specific area, we had no desire to operate a waste disposal facility. We certainly didn't know of any private sector partners who would want to operate it. Our understanding of the unmanned dumpsters was just a non-starter because of the potential for problems. Curbside collection, just not viable in our region. I can only imagine the field day and the great increase in population of raccoons with that one. And our understanding of the challenges of the collection vehicles that were stationed at satellite points in Muskoka was that it wasn't entirely positive in the population. So that's why we took the approach that we did with the survey, which was launched in October. On November 2nd, there was a presentation to council from Muskoka. And so we watched this session with great interest and took a look at the presentation. And so they presented some really persuasive points and some greater background information than we had on the success of their program. So while we still feel that that's not a long-term sustainable solution for a region, and we do have a number of reasons, it could potentially be in that interim period as administration and council work towards reopening a transfer station that certainly could address some of the concerns of residents around distance to travel, cost to get to Pine Springs or Maple Lake, and certainly the big picture environmental concerns with emissions and safety along North Shore and St. Peter's roads in particular. Does that answer your question, Deputy Mayor?
Go ahead.
It does. I just want to absolutely make clear that I am in full agreement that surveys are a wonderful thing, and I'm glad you've done it. And you did have a tremendous sample size return, higher than many surveys that I've seen in the past. So congrats on all of that. I'm only fearful that the leading questions of, do you like the transfer station idea, in absence of the others, gives a response rate of a high level of support for one of the options when none of the options were actually presented. So, you know, in terms of my own receipt of those numbers, I wouldn't be able to count the number of people who really, really want a transfer station. What I do get is the number of people who really, really want a solution, a long-term, good, solid, economically viable solution to this concern. That's what I take away from that, and I am grateful for that. But with respect to your numbers, I will be still considering the other options in the Cane-Beam report, simply because the survey did not speak to, you know, to those other options. And I'm delighted to hear you say that you did appreciate the Muskoka delegation from the last meeting, and that you're open to, you know, to those thoughts. I think there's some openness here at council too. So that's also a really nice harmony point.
It was an interesting presentation. My only concern about it is that the price associated with that was not indicative of what we'd be looking at here. And that's something we'd have to drill down on. I look for other questions and comments from other members of council. Well, I'd like to thank you for your delegation. We will be having further discussions about this. It is not on the agenda today to drill down on this, but we've heard you loud and clear, as we have been doing, you know, since prior to the election. It is unusual to go back and take a step back on a substantial decision like the one that we made, you know, about the transfer station and versus Maple Lake. At any rate, we'll be looking at options and talking about this further, and I'm sure that we'll be talking some more. So thank you. And if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation. Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good discussion.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved, council received a delegation from Shelley Fellows and Peter Dadzis for information regarding the results of a Hawk Lake waste disposal survey conducted by a community group.
All in favor? That's carried. The next delegation is from Robert Harper and Kathleen Dewar about the proposed cell tower at Boshkong Lake. If you'd like to come forward. Oh, right now.
Thank you very much for letting us come today and sit with you about this issue. I'm Kathleen, this is my husband Robert, and here we are.
And here I thought that you were Robert and you were.
I know.
It's easy to make that
It
mistake.
is.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. I'm going to dive right in because time is precious. A few weeks ago, we attended a Zoom meeting with Rogers representative about the cell tower on Boshkong Lake Road. We were not entirely happy with all of their responses. We got the impression that they were going through the motions just because they had to. And there was a few things they kept referring back to, that what they were doing was part of the Eeyore and Cell Gap project, as if that made everything all right. That project is not a license for cellular internet companies to do whatever they want. And they did not include all of the information that the EORN's tower siting guidelines requires, specifically the Transport Canada marking and lighting requirements. After that meeting, we actually contacted a number of people in our area, and were surprised to find that hardly any of them even knew that a cell tower was being proposed. That may be partly because the publication of the information about the tower started after most of the summer people had already left. And it's already been noted in a report to you about the Oxtongue Bell Tower. Fewer people who know about the tower, the easier it is to get approval. And there's no doubt that some parts of the province do need improvements in cell phone and internet coverage, but that doesn't necessarily apply everywhere. Local circumstances need to be taken into account, and many people should not have to suffer for the desires of a few. People who come to this area generally accept that services will not be the same as in the city. Garbage collection, as you've just gone through, is one of them. Sewage is another. Police, ambulance, fire department response is probably not quite as good as it is in the cities, although they actually do a pretty good job up here. So people should be prepared to accept a somewhat lower standard of services for some issues. During the Zoom meeting, only 2 people indicated that they were unhappy with the existing service. I see there's a person from Buttermilk Falls Resort going to present 2 in favor of it, so maybe there's 3 people. Rogers put a lot of emphasis on increasing demand for cell service. But in the area where they are putting the tower, there's not going to be a major increase in population. Most of the desirable land has already been taken up, and what's left is wetlands and bush. I'm sure a few people will build houses in the bush, but there's not going to be any massive increase in population. And as far as an increase in demand by the existing people, again, Rogers kept referring to what happened in Toronto. Toronto is 2 million people, not 2,600. And a lot of the demand in Toronto is driven by government and big businesses who are trying to run 100, 200, 300 computers. That just does not happen in Algonquin Highlands. There are some other locations that are within the search area that Rogers specified, but would affect or negatively affect far fewer people. The area is already sparsely inhabited, and most of the houses in that area, when I drove through it, the bush is right close to their house, so they couldn't see the tower anyway. Access to roads and hydro would be just as good as on Boshkong Lake Road. So we think that Rogers should maybe spend a little more time looking for an alternative location. I know that Christian Lee said that they had looked at other locations, but they couldn't find anybody willing to lease them the land. Every time I've driven through that area, I have seen bush property for sale. Maybe Rogers should buy a lot and become a taxpayer in the township. One of the principles of the Township of Algonquin Highlands official plan is the reduction of light pollution. And you certainly have a lot of company in that respect. Other jurisdictions are even going farther than just trying to encourage limiting light pollution. They're actually legislating it. Germany has already proposed that the warning lights on towers have to be on demand. In Ontario, some airports already have landing lights that are activated by the planes as they approach. So the technology exists. They just need the will to use it. And people in this area pay a premium for lakefront property, not just when they buy it, but also in their taxes. They aren't paying that extra money to look at a flashing red light. And Boshkong Lake already has a large number of unnecessarily bright lights around the shores. We don't need to add any more. There's already two of them, one on Highway 118 and one on the Partridge Lake Road, which you can see from most of the lake. Adding another one is not going to improve the situation. You can't be anywhere on the lake without seeing at least one of those lights. Some of them will have two and eventually three. Resorts aren't going to be able to honestly advertise a scenic view. You can't escape looking at these lights. And they're destroying one of the few natural resources that Algonquin Highlands has. There's not too many natural resources in Algonquin Highlands. Mining never did take off. Hunting, fishing, and trapping are pretty much gone. Logging is vastly reduced. The scenic view and tourism is one of the main industries here. If that gets spoiled, then you're spoiling one of the few resources that the township has. And personally speaking, this light will be visible no matter where we are. We can see it, we will be able to see it from our living room, our dining room, our deck, pretty much everywhere on the property. We can't escape it. Rogers at the time did not provide much information on the light, saying this was up to Transport Canada. I see in the information they provided for the council for this meeting that they are proposing a dome guard that will stop light from being projected pretty much down at the base of the tower. This isn't going to help people all around the lake. And Transport Canada does not dictate what lights go on the tower. They give you options, and the tower provider can select an option as long as it's one of the ones that meets Transport Canada requirements. They will accept it, even if there are other options that are less obtrusive. And this is, I went through the regulations for the Division 3 of the Canadian Aviation Regulations. They define an obstacle as any structure more than 90 meters above ground level. The proposed tower is 91.5 meters. We're asking if it's possible that a slight decrease in tower height would remove the requirement for lights completely. We don't know why the tower height was picked the way it was, whether it can be changed or not. We're just asking that that be looked at. And if it is determined that the tower does have to be built and it does have to have lights, there's at least two companies, one of them in Canada, that have guards available to limit the visibility of the aeronautical beacons from ground level up to 2.5 kilometers away, while still meeting the requirements for visibility by pilots. And my information is a little outdated, but 30 of these deflectors have already been installed on antenna towers in Ontario. Pre-COVID price was about $5,000 to add them to the tower. Even if that's gone up a lot, it's still a minor part of the total cost of the tower. One of these companies is, I may be pronouncing it wrong, CGNE in Quebec. The other is BCE in California. When we suggested this to Rogers, they didn't seem to even be interested in investigating these guards. So we're asking the council to maybe use a little influence to encourage them to do so. Many people who aren't actually subjected to having to look at the lights on the towers underestimate the impact that it will have on residents, even several kilometers away. Pardon me. We have approached other residents on Boshkung Lake, and we know we're not alone in objecting to the construction of yet another tower. The impact is going to be huge on some people. We're still trying to get more information, but getting email addresses for people who aren't here regularly is difficult. Council and lake associations have spent a lot of time worrying about fireworks and trying to control them. By comparison, fireworks are a very short-term and transient nuisance. These flashing lights are going to be there all the time, and once they're there, they can't ever be removed. And having a scenic view is more than just something that's nice to have. It's actually a resource that should be protected for the benefit of the whole township. It should not be polluted just to satisfy the desires of a few. And once it's lost, it can't ever be regained. So we're asking the council to use their influence to just get Rogers to slow down a bit and do some more work on justifying the location of the tower and the necessity for a tower, and possibly to look at other alternatives for the lights. We're open for questions.
Well, I have just a
Well,
brief
so-
statement, if that's all right. I just have one brief statement as well.
Okay, go ahead.
It's just a brief statement. I just got up this morning and this is what I wrote. Thank you very much for letting me speak on this issue. So my concern is like, where are we in this process? Are we at the beginning of the process? Are we in the middle of the process, or are we at the end? So is all my concern and my worry for nothing? It's a terrible feeling to know that something you hold dear and depend on for rest, recreation, and joy can be taken away capriciously. That we could suffer a great loss and can do nothing about it. How much power do we have here as residents of this lake? I am here as a resident to raise my deep concerns and doubtful hope that this lake be preserved, protected, and kept pristine. Enjoying a beautiful view is not a sin. I am not going to feel guilty because we enjoy a beautiful view, which actually we don't, because we have a red blinking light just on the horizon. A gorgeous view is not something we should give away lightly, be bullied out of, or talked out of. We should not be forced to fight each other over any issue if the cost is the loss of something we can never get back. Residents on this lake fought hard and decisively against fireworks. A brief moment of sound and light, then it's gone, and the quiet returns. This structure is permanent, and I'm hoping with all my heart that the same zeal applied to the fireworks be applied to this issue as well. This is not an industrial park where one more tower doesn't make any difference. This is a thriving community on a lake surrounded by trees and wildlife. We are proud to care for this small parcel of land and water. Residents are proud to preserve and protect it. This issue is only a continuation of that promise to keep it beautiful for the next generations and beyond. The question then is, how can we, working with partners, resolve this issue? My challenge to Rogers is this: raising towers for this purpose was implemented in the last century. Can there not be a better, improved, less polluting way to deal with this issue in this century? Surely giving in or giving up cannot be our only option. A view is a gift, a precious resource that should be protected, not polluted. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. I can tell that you're, both passionate about the issue, and I don't disagree with some of the comments that you're making. As you know, we do have to consider competing interests. We talk about 2,600 people here. That's a permanent population and doesn't consider the seasonal population, which makes our population grow exponentially. Our responsibility is supposedly to look at this from a land use perspective and a land use perspective only. But we did insist that the proponents do a communications a program, so that people are aware and do have the ability to comment. I hear you loud and clear about the lights and the intrusion of the lights, and I do believe that I don't know how many conditions we're really allowed to put on approvals, but I do believe that we can have an open and substantive conversation with both Rogers and Eorn about shielding. You know, I think that that's an important issue, and I think that there are ways that the lights can be shielded, or at least reduce the impact should the tower go ahead. You know, I think the council is probably prepared to have that discussion. As you're aware, Rogers and Eorn representatives will be here shortly, and we can ask questions of them. So you're welcome to stay and listen to that part of the presentation and see where we land on this. We are getting increased demands for service, and this is being considered a utility. And I know it's not something you want to look at. But the federal government has put specific restrictions on what we're allowed to use as a reason to say no. And unfortunately, aesthetics is one of them. And that's the thing that's bothering everybody so much is the impact that it has on our view and why we're all here. And the other thing that I find shocking, and really there's nothing we can do about it, is that they will not consider the impact to property values. And I know that there are people who believe that this has an impact on property values. Fireworks, I hear the point that you're making about fireworks. There are a lot of other things associated with the issue of fireworks, and you know, I can't put the two of them in the same basket, really. It's just because there's pollution, I mean, true pollution to the water, and there's a lot of things that you know, and that's something that we have looked at reducing. And I'm sure the issue of fireworks will come up again. But at any rate, I'd look to see if there are any questions or specific comments before we receive the delegation. Just would thank you, and as I say, you're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the discussion. And if we don't decide in your favor, please don't throw rotten tomatoes at us.
We will not, but we implore you to find someplace else. I mean,
Well, I should have said the one thing
yes.
about the alternate location. I know that we're hearing an example of Oxtongue Lake because there was a second location determined. However, that location had actually been approved prior to what they brought to us when they finally did make their application. The person who had said that that land could be used had sort of decided he was going to try and sell it and then changed his mind. So they had an option in place to begin with, and that's not always the case. There's a timeline that's got to be met, and I know that that Eorn is kind of up against that timeline.
So
Anyway.
they have not picked another location, so they're not expecting a no. So I asked Rogers that as well. I said, well, if you get a no, what's your alternative? And he didn't have an answer for that, because if we're here to say no to the tower. So if no is the answer to this proposal, do they then have another choice? Do you
They don't
understand what I
have
say?
to.
That was my question, is if you get a no, Mr. Rogers, then what do you do? Because I'd like to, I'm here to say no. I'm not here to say, well, okay, maybe if you have to, or okay, you know, I am here to say a no.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm done talking.
This is not an
I know.
opportunity for a debate.
Thank you.
They can go ahead even if we say no. And they may consider looking at another location, but I suspect because they are running up against their deadline, because this is a project that's funded by both the federal and the provincial governments, they might just decide to go ahead, or they might decide not to put a tower there at all, which does not meet necessarily all the needs of what we're finding are there. Anyway,
Right. Well, hopefully they can find a solution to the problem that everybody is happy. So we hope that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Did anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation? Deputy Mayor Dayoud, Councillor Shortreed. All in favor? That's carried. Next up is Mr. Stephen Orr from Buttermilk Falls. You'd like to join us? Sure. Welcome.
Thanks for hearing me. I got involved in this process pretty late, and I got involved in this process for one reason only, which was that some negative feedback on the tower purported to talk for the local resorts and businesses. I don't talk for any of the local resorts and businesses but my own. So be really clear, this is not me locally. But as a resort, we're a resort that does not provide Wi-Fi at the cottages because we think that most people who come want to disconnect from the world. But the people who do rely on good cell service. As a business owner, I have absolutely crap cell service at the north end of the lake, right? The number of times I have to step outside at -30 in the winter to even make a call connect is uncounted. So the need for the tower, from my perspective, is huge, right? It will absolutely improve both my guests, the ones who want to stream the football game while they're staying, and my ability to do business on the lake. From talking to some of my neighbors who are north of me, they also struggle with getting any kind of cell coverage. I think most of the towers that we actually get coverage from are south end of the lake, and they're far enough away that we don't get much in the way of signal strength. So yes, I was basically just here to say that some of the negative stuff that purported to speak on my behalf didn't. We believe that the tower would actually improve our business and our ability to do business. Issues around lighting, I totally agree. If we can make it so you can't see the lights from the ground, that's a great thing, right? If the tower can be made shorter, I don't have a problem with that either. But the actual infrastructure of having better cell coverage up here is something we're absolutely for. That's pretty much all I have to say. So short and sweet.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Orr?
Go ahead.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Thank you. And just for clarification only, would your business, would the groups who come to stay at your resort have a visual on the tower, or would it be
I don't
behind
know.
you?
I mean, the resort itself is steeply sloped and we have lots of trees, so it's possible that it won't peak above the tree line. I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to know without somebody doing some good 3D modeling.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
That's it. Nice and short.
Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive Mr. Orr's delegation? Councillor Short Reed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Short Reed, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, Council receives a delegation for information from Stephen Orr expressing support for the installation of a proposed cell tower on Bosch-Kung Lake.
All in favor? That's carried. We might normally break now, but I think because we've got Rogers and Eorn kind of on hold in the wings, and there's people in the room who are interested in hearing our discussion, we'll move forward. So if you'd like to move back into the audience.
I would love to stay, but I have to borrow a neighbor's truck to get here today because my truck's in the shop and he needs it back. So
I'm
I should
sure
go
you
return.
will hear the results of our discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Yes.
next up is planning business. Good morning, Mr. O'Callaghan.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
And the first item on your list is the proposed Rogers Tower.
Yes. Yes, so Rogers is proposing a 91.5 meter tower located at 1491 Bosch-Kung Lake Road. Rogers did hold a virtual public meeting on the proposed tower on October 23rd of this year. And a public consultation summary is attached to my report, which was provided to council. In that, Rogers does address comments that were received before the deadline on the proposal. Several letters of objection were received, and 2 letters of support were also received. I would like to note that circulation of the proposed tower was provided to all property owners on the lake in accordance with the council policy. And although it is after summer when these notices do go out, they are provided to the mailing addresses of the property owners. So even if they are seasonal residents, they would receive this notification. So seeing as Rogers has followed the township policy, staff have reviewed the proposal and are in support of the proposed tower. And I'm happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Just as a note for council's information, I know that Deputy Mayor Dayu and myself have both received several pieces of correspondence from the same individual over the last couple of days, basically making the same arguments as Mr. Harper has made about, visual impact and, longevity on the lake. It's basically the same arguments, and I'm not sure if you were copied on those.
Yes, I was. And also just to further comment on the lighting aspect of the tower. So as you've previously noted, it's not something council can base their decision on with these towers. The federal government specifically excludes that from being a consideration in these towers, as well as our own policy. So.
Not to say that we can't ask them. Any questions on Sean's report? Then we'll bring in the gentleman from Rogers, and is Mr. Pine here as well from ERN? Okay. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
You have heard our planner's report, and you have heard, I'm sure you've heard the delegations. I wonder, before we get into asking any specific questions, if you have comments that you would like to make to council.
Sure, I guess I'll take the lead. It's unfortunate with the first delegation. They came up, seem to have misrepresented a lot of things, not only from the public meeting, but from written correspondence. A lot of the items that they brought up have been clarified in writing, yet we're still presented in a very different way. So not sure if we need to go through those in one by one, but I can if necessary. It's definitely a difficult thing citing communication towers in areas that are with a lot of water, to put it simply, without any foreground screening on large lakes. The reality is you can see taller objects like towers for kilometers and kilometers. So there's simply nowhere where these towers can be built in areas like Algonquin Highlands where nobody can see them. Rogers is, of course, sensitive to the fact that people who have lakefront property probably aren't super thrilled with seeing a blinking light in the distance. At the same time, contrary to Mr. Harper's information, a 90-meter tower would require lighting the same way that a 91.5-meter tower would. There's no distinction of what's an obstruction. I'm not sure where that information came from, but in our experience, there's no difference. So Transport Canada makes that assessment based on the location and the height of the structure. There's no delineation at 90 meters. Rogers and EORN are trying to go about this in a way that works with the community, brings service to the community, and obviously not looking to be public enemy number one either. Rogers is a company that counts on a subscriber base from the community. So the last thing we want to do is unnecessarily upset people. But similar to the landfill issue this morning, sometimes there's just not one solution that works for all parties and in all respects. So we do our level best to try to find a location that has the least impact while also offering the maximum amount of service. But at the end of the day, we're also constricted by the willingness of a willing property owner. Rogers isn't in the business of buying land and buying huge properties just for the purpose of erecting a single tower. That's not the model. And what we put forward after an exhaustive search is the best available option. So I'll leave it at that. If there are specific questions, either from things that came up from the delegation or otherwise, happy to respond.
I guess that I have two questions, and I'm sure the council may have questions as well. Why was the decision made to put a 91-meter tower there as opposed to a lower tower? It seems to me that one of the biggest concerns is the lighting that's required on the tower. And secondary to that, to responding to the height of the tower, how open would Rogers be to shielding that would reduce the impact?
Sure. So good question. The 90-meter height is the standard height that's being used for the Eorn-Selgant project and is a standard height that's used for Rogers and most other carriers in these rural settings. As was pointed out in the public meeting, this would actually be among the lower of the towers in the area. The other two towers, you'll have to pardon me, I don't have the name at the top of my head, but the lake just north of Boshkung Lake, there's a tower just north of there. There's also one at the south end of Boshkung Lake near where I believe Mr. Harper lives. Those are both significantly higher than 90 meters than the one I'm proposing. I think that we're proposing. I think one of them is 138 meters. The other one was 120. So 90 meters is actually lower than the average tower in the area. And anything lower than that wouldn't adequately service the area. It's tricky when you're talking about land that isn't flat like farmland. There's a lot of topography and rocky areas, and the height is required to be able to service the maximum number of people.
And the lighting, your willingness to?
Yeah, so great point. As I mentioned to Mr. Harper, we're always our standard approach is to include that shielding. The information that he provided with the shields to us anyway was information that was over 20 years old. Rogers does deploy shielding to the greatest extent possible. At the end of the day, it can't shield the light from casting out as far as 4 and 5 kilometers. There's just no technology that exists to do that. But we work with Transport Canada to find measures to mitigate the light to the greatest extent possible while still being compliant. Again, Rogers, the last thing we want to do is be, like I said, public enemy number one and ruining people's enjoyment of their cottage, that we're in areas where we're trying to serve them.
Well, to be fair, you're not public enemy number one with everyone.
Right. We don't want to be public enemy number one with anyone.
Right. Mr. Pine, is there anything that you wanted to add before we get into questions from other members of council?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and members of council. I think it's been well covered by Rogers. I appreciate, of course, for sure, the balance that council has to make in weighing decisions like this, and really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the way that you're handling this particular tower site. I think from an Eorn point of view, the tower is really critically important to our network as a whole, so that we can ensure that there's contiguous and continuous connectivity or coverage throughout the region. It's an important piece of the project. And of course, I recognize, individuals' concerns about the lighting, and I think Christian has handled the question as best we can, but hopefully we've done a thorough and appropriate consultation. I know that Christian and Eric have spent a lot of effort to do that, and staff who have reviewed the work. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be here today and try and answer any questions if you have any.
I have to say, I have no notion at this point in time, until we get into questions and answers, what council's direction will be. But to respond to the question that was raised by one of the delegations, what would be Rogers and Eorn's response should we say no?
Well, I think the answer, at least from Eorn's point of view, is that we probably just have to move on, unfortunately. We are running up against the project timelines, and it takes sometimes up to 2 years to actually get a tower constructed. That includes the process we're going through right now, but the initial periods as well. each of these sites need to have archaeological assessments and natural heritage reviews done for our First Nations commitments. That all takes time as well. So we really are up against a time frame. And we've had the same kind of discussions with municipalities in other parts of Eastern Ontario, and it's a tough decision to make. And I won't be the one that would finally make it, but I can suspect that the primary option would be just to move on and unfortunately leave a gap in coverage.
Questions from council? Councillor Barry?
Thank you for your time. When you say the gap in coverage, now some of the constituents are saying that there is coverage and others are saying there isn't coverage. So can you give a bit of a snapshot of, he said, she said in regards to that?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. This is actually something that I had intended to include in my introduction, actually, because that's I think part of the overarching summary of concerns with this particular site and ties in with all of the lakes and waterfront in the area. There is an existing tower at the south end of Boshkung Lake. There is an existing tower north of Talls Lake, I believe, right? The one just north of Boshkung Lake. So north of Halls Lake and at the south end of Boshkung Lake, service is pretty good. At the same time, the people at the south end of Boshkung Lake are the ones generally raising concerns about the fact that the proposed tower would be in their line of sight. So it may be 4 or 5 kilometers in the distance, but on the horizon, they may see the lights late at night, and that's where the concern comes from. So there's a segment of the population who, in their opinion, don't stand to gain anything from this tower because they already enjoy service from the existing tower at the south end of the lake. So they only have potentially an impact to their sight lines to lose. So it's an obvious decision for them that they'd rather not have it. And we appreciate that. At the end of the day, though, there is a big segment towards the north end of Boshkung Lake and around that area and westward where there is not adequate service. So we tend to not hear as much from the people who are for these proposals as against, unfortunately. But there is a documented need up there, as shown by our second delegation today and others. And yeah, that's what kind of sums it up. Is the challenge here is that there are people who may see it but don't necessarily feel the need for it because they enjoy adequate service at the moment.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Richards.
I have one comment and 2 questions. Comment being one thing that hasn't been raised yet today, but we've seen with previous applications is how we are so copiously blessed in this township with Crown land until it becomes a disadvantage in cases such as this, where there isn't a model to put a tower on Crown land, whereas that might not be problematic in most other regions of Southern Ontario. For us, it does mean that these sorts of projects are confined to places such as the strip around lakes, rather than a little bit further back, simply because that is the type of land, the category of land that is available. So I do have some empathy there that, we're even limited in that respect as to where these towers can go. My 2 questions are, what happens when technology advances so much that we no longer will have need of these towers nor the lights, either for because there's an advancement in aviation technology or in cellular technology? What happens to the towers? What happens to the lights in that unknown time frame? What is Rogers' plan for what happens to those assets? And the second question is, if you would kindly make any remark on the other types of solutions that we've heard from other communities and, which you've discussed in the past, but this is a brand new application, the lower 2 tower solution and the collocation solution. What are your thoughts on those 2 options for this application?
Thank you for the question, Councillor, or questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to think the first one. What was the first one again?
The first one being when technology advances beyond, what happens to these assets?
Sure. So don't foresee that happening anytime soon, but in the event when the time comes where there are other solutions available where towers aren't needed, then the tower would simply be decommissioned. Our lease agreement with the property owner includes a decommission clause, including a full dismantling and removal of the tower structure. Your kind of separate question was about the lighting. In the event that there were ever aviation technology that would render the tower lighting irrelevant, then I imagine at that point it could be removed. I don't see that ever happening either, just simply because it's not just commercial jet airliners, even things like hot air balloons, might require aeronautical lighting. So I'm not equipped to comment on that in great detail right now, but I imagine if it were completely redundant, then they could be removed. In terms of other solutions, like building two different towers that are shorter, that's simply not an option as part of this project. So that wouldn't happen. Simply as Jim Pine had pointed out, if that were the only acceptable solution, then it would just be nothing in essence. When it comes to co-location, Rogers does have antennas on all of the other structures in the area. So they're either our towers or we already are co-locating on all other available towers in the area. So that option has already been exhausted.
Thank you.
If I could just add just a quick comment. The EORN project is actually called the EORN Cell Gap Project. And it really is designed to fill in where there are gaps in coverage. And that's why the towers are going generally where they're going, is to close those coverage gaps. So it's, we're trying to find the best location in order to fill the area where we don't have coverage now, where people can't get coverage. So it's just to keep that in mind, that this is really what the project's about, is to fill those areas where there isn't any or insufficient coverage at this point.
Councillor Richards.
So my biggest concern is the lighting. It truly is, because our natural sky is one of our biggest assets here and why people come. There was recently lighting put on the tower near me that is bright white. It lights up the entire sky. When I was out to watch the meteor shower in late summer, looking in that direction, you couldn't see a single star. I drove by the tower last night. It's clear there's deflectors on it, because when you're right under the tower, you don't see that white light at all. But when you are at a distance, it's substantial. It actually is blinking. And it's like a strobe light going off in people's cottages. And that's disturbing. I like one of the suggestions about an on-approach lighting as being acceptable to Transport Canada, but I'm sure something like that is more expensive. And I'm not really hearing that there's a commitment from Rogers to deal with the obtrusiveness of that light. It sounds like you're willing to maybe put some deflectors on, but that doesn't help anybody at a distance. And I know that that's not something that we can force you into, but it would certainly go a long way in my eyes to see you address it more aggressively.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I think it's important to understand that the lights serve absolutely no purpose for Rogers. So Rogers does not have any stake in the lighting aside from being compliant with Transport Canada's requirements. Rogers is always interested in exploring different ways to mitigate them to the greatest extent possible. The on-approach, on-demand lighting I am familiar with at airports. That's not new. That's existed for over 20 years. That's not something I don't think they would ever apply to something like obstruction marking. Generally, obstruction marking is there for kind of emergency services. Like no airplane should ever be flying at 300 feet above Boshkung Lake. I think we can all agree. They're generally quite a bit higher than that. I think they're there for those emergency situations to be able to have sight on those obstructions. So I don't think an on-demand solution would ever, that's my personal opinion, I don't think that would ever be applicable. But at the same time, it's Transport Canada. It's important to understand it's Transport Canada who determines what those lighting needs are, and Rogers simply complies with those requirements. At the same time, we do, to the greatest extent we can, deploy shielding and mitigation measures to the extent we can, but it can't affect the functionality that the light is there to serve, if that makes sense. So again, I appreciate it. And like I said, there's nowhere in an area that has a large lake, there's nowhere you can put a tower where it can't be seen by anyone. It's simply a reality. So we're in this situation where the service is necessary in a lot of senses, and going forward, the availability of wireless services and data services is going to be seen by a lot of people as being as important as having electricity. This is a vital part of the way that people live and work day to day. So these services are vital, and why the Eorn Cell-Gap project exists, and why the level of funding and commitment is behind that. And so our job is to try to find a way of having these towers that are necessary in a way that is as unobtrusive as possible, but it's impossible to make them invisible. So again, we're sensitive to the lighting concerns. At the same time, there's very little of that that's within Rogers' control.
I do have to comment that for me, this is a struggle. Because I agree and understand the concerns that are raised. And in this case, there hasn't been a resounding negative response to this particular tower, but I understand fully the concerns that are being raised, and the desire to retain the beauty and the aesthetics of the area that we live in. However, I'm also convinced that these towers are key to our economy, our tourism economy, our economy overall, and our growth. And we are experiencing substantial growth, more than we ever expected. I know that there was a study being done at the county level that we had to put a stop to the study because the numbers of growth were so unexpected and unanticipated that they had to go back and drill down on the numbers. So we really are growing much faster, and I lay the blame for that on COVID to some extent, but it just seems to be a natural thing that's been happening with people either turning their cottages into permanent homes, or more people that are coming to the area. There is increased demand. I can confirm, because I drive the stretch every day of Highway 35, that there are several gaps, and I'm not sure if you get into the back roads what further gaps there are, but I know that there are concerns. For me, it's all about safety and emergency response. That's the most important thing. That if somebody needs to call for a fire or ambulance, that they need and deserve the right and the ability to be able to do that. So I have struggled with the balance, and I'm sure that we all do. But if there are no further questions, go ahead, Councillor Barry.
Okay, just a question in regards to this application. Aside from the property owner that wants to have the cell tower on their property, is the current application within, what is the closest distance for the next property owner? I know we changed our policy from 1,000 meters to 500 meters. And I asked the planner, but the planner said I'd have to double check with Rogers.
Yeah, and going through the comments received, it looks like it's about 430 meters to the closest residence. That's not the property owner.
Go ahead.
And also clarification on how many lakes it will be visible from. Like sometimes when we get these applications, it's, you know, one community area. And from what I've been reading, just from comments and driving around in some cases, is it possible that it could be visible from 4 lakes, from Halls, Cushog Beach and Boshkong? Is that correct?
Go ahead, John.
So that I'm not sure of. I don't know if it would be visible from other lakes or not. And I'm not sure if, Christian, if you would have that information.
I don't have that information, no. It's probably fair to say if you were at the far northeast corner of Halls Lake, you may be able to see the very top of it. The other 2 lakes, I'd be doubtful, but I'm not in a position to guarantee that in any way. I don't have any official modeling, but it would be a great distance and through a great distance of forested area. So if it were visible at all, it would be a very, very small amount, but I'm doubtful.
Any other questions from council? I'll just ask council to consider the rationale that we're supposed to be looking at when we make these decisions, and that's the land use perspective. And the restrictions on that the federal government have put on us. It's unfortunate, but those restrictions are there. Could I have a mover and a seconder to put the resolution on the floor? Councillor Shortreed. This is to put the resolution on the floor. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that council received report PL 12623 regarding proposed Rogers Telecommunications Tower Site C8601 submitted by Sean O'Callaghan. The council is satisfied the procedures in the township's telecommunication facility installations policy have been followed in order to comply with the requirements for the consultation with the public and land use authority for the proposed the tower proposal. And further, the council directs staff to advise Rogers Communications. The council supports the installation of a 91.5 meter telecommunications tower known as Rogers Site C8601-1491, Boshkong Lake Road, part of Lot 9, Concession 6, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Boshkong Lake, conditional on Rogers Communication Inc. entering into an agreement with the township permitting fire services the option in future of co-locating on the tower at no cost should it be necessary.
You have a question on the resolution? Okay, go ahead.
So there is no consideration of possibly lowering it or decreasing the lights.
Well, I think that we've heard that Rogers is prepared to do whatever they can to do shielding, whether that is deemed to be sufficient to satisfy, you know, the comments and concerns that have been raised. It's still going to be visible. But there's a willingness to shield. I don't hear a willingness to install a lower tower. That's not an option.
No, that's not what's being proposed. And again, it's just important to for everyone to understand that Rogers is not in a position to make any concessions with the lighting. That's the jurisdiction of Transport Canada.
Any other comments? Okay, in favor? At the risk of being unpopular, I'm going to have to say that I'm in favor of the proposal. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. We will now take
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
12-minute break.
So this is the end of the process, not the beginning. So was it just been ongoing for months and months and we weren't aware of it?
This is not an opportunity for us to have a debate about the timing. This has been something that we knew was coming, but I mean, really, the application has only come forward to us with the detailed information at this meeting.
Yeah, we just got notice in like September.
So the municipal process is very limited. Rogers would have been doing background research on finding the sites first, and then they come forward with a proposal to the township, which we have to consider.
Their process has been ongoing for some time,
Right.
not ours.
Yeah.
Because we're very limited in our ability to say, Yay or nay? Pardon me?
I'm saying as a resident, ours would be less than yours.
I would say it's probably about equal. I mean, given the opportunity to speak at the public meetings or to submit your comments at the public meetings.
We appreciate you.
Well-
And I'm glad that we got all we did today. Because then this meeting, we wouldn't have worse in the face.
Well, and we appreciate your coming forward. However, our meeting has been adjourned and welcome back to our regular meeting. We'll continue with the planning business, and the next item on the agenda is proposed shore road allowance closing on Quagga Lake.
Yes, thank you. This is an application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property on Quagga Lake. This is now the bylaw being presented to council today to close that shore road allowance. It was circulated for comment to the required commenting agencies as well as to the adjacent property owners, and no objections or comments were received. So staff are recommending approval of the bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments on that application? Could I have a mover and a seconder to move forward with that? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 12323 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 20, concession 13, geographic township of Sherburne, Quagga Lake. And council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be brought forward.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is an application for the closure of a shore road allowance by Keys, Legault and Legault on Boschcon.
Yes, this is a joint application between three properties, three adjacent properties on Boschkong Lake. Staff have reviewed the proposal and there's nothing of particular note and would support the application moving forward with the through the regular process.
Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 12423 regarding proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 5, concession 10, geographic township of Stanhope, Boschkong Lake. And council approves in principle application OSRA 22ABC 23 made to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance and request the applicants to proceed in accordance with the shoreline road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is a proposed severance by a numbered company in the township of Livingston.
Yes, this proposed severance was before council back in September of this year, where a number of conditions were recommended, one being the entering into a severance agreement. So this report is bringing forward that agreement, which will be registered on title and includes recommendations that were made in the scoped environmental impact study and the lake capacity assessment. So staff are supportive of the bylaw being approved to enter into this agreement.
Any questions or comments? Can I have a mover and a seconder to approve the application? Councillors Berry and Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives report PL 12523 regarding a severance agreement for part of lot 10, concession 6, geographic township of Livingston, Livingston Lake, 1455721 Ontario Inc., submitted by Sean O'Callahan, and the council directs a bylaw be brought forward authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your planning department update. Anything you'd like to highlight on that?
No, nothing to highlight, but happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions on John's planning report? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Richards and Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Richards, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council receives report PL 12723 regarding monthly activities submitted by Sean O'Callahan for information.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, under planning are the minutes of the October 27th Committee of Adjustment meeting. Any questions or comments on that? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive them? Councillors Barry and Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council receives the October 27th, 2023 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Next up is building and bylaw. Morning, Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The monthly activities report is only a couple of things to highlight, really. The successful recruitment of our new bylaw officer, Robert Masia. And yeah, the increased in construction value of almost 3 million with a permit fees in the range of around $20,000 this month or last month.
Any questions on the monthly activity report? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Barry, Deputy Mayor Dayoud.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Deputy Mayor Dayoud, be it resolved, council receives report BLDG 2023 regarding monthly activities submitted by Greg Moore for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Now, I was the one who asked for this brief discussion to take place on whether or not we wanted to consider a township sign bylaw. We're one of the few municipalities that do not have a sign bylaw. And I recently had a number of complaints about sign proliferation. And so I just wanted to bring it to council and see if you had any desire for us to look into that or not. So any comments, thoughts? This is something that would, it would go to the bylaw department for some research and, probably take some time to come back to us if we did ask for that to take place. Deputy Mayor Dayoud?
Yeah, if this is a concern coming from the general population and we have the power to look at it, I think we should consider it.
I mean, there are some limitations, we don't have control over the MTO and their sign progress, but we do on, it just seems like there's an awful lot of signs everywhere on, and I know that we don't control signs that are on people's lawns, but when you see, I think what really sort of put this one person over the edge were the blinds, and there's signs all over the municipality. They're basically advertising for blinds. Zebras or something. I'm not sure what that is, but anyway. Councillor Shortreed.
No, I agree. It's becoming a problem. You see them everywhere now. It's just one day, there's more and more and more, and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Thoughts, Councillor Richards and then Councillor Barry.
So this would be about signs on like our property, not on a person's property. They would be allowed to put whatever sign they want on their property.
That's actually not the case. There are limitations on what people can put on their own properties. Just from a visual perspective. For instance, even if somebody's got a home occupation, they're very limited as to what they're allowed to put up as far as size and color. So, I guess we would look to have options brought back to us of things that we wanted to consider and can discuss the pros and cons of anything that's brought to us at that time. Go ahead.
Yes, to answer your question, yes, it'll just be township owned property. We won't be able to regulate Crown or county or highway. And even on our own property, sometimes that's regulated by, say, for example, the highway, on what signs can go there depending on size. And they have those regulations as well. So, but certainly we can develop something and bring it back to council for consideration.
Go ahead.
So I'm sorry, we can't regulate it on a person's private property, just ours?
I believe we can.
We can?
Yeah.
And that's what you.
Now, whether we want to do that or not, I mean, I just want to see kind of what the standard small rural municipality kind of bylaws there are in place, and we can discuss the pros and cons of what's being proposed or suggested when it comes back to us. Councilor Berry.
I support looking into this for sure, especially if it's complaint driven. I think there's a difference too between like a temporary garage sale sign
Oh, yeah.
versus like bugs be gone sign from a business that might not even operate in the municipality.
Okay, so you have some direction there. It's another little project for you to work on, but you know, we're not setting any deadline on that for you. So just, you know, as you can, as time permits for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Do we need a resolution for that? Okay. Well, thank you. That leads us into Parks, Recreation and Trails. Good morning, Mr. Card.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
So you have brought before us the proposed fees and charges increases for next year.
That's right. So what council will see for consideration is a 3% increase in all fee categories, except the Dorset Recreation Center membership and day use fees, which council had previously discussed that not raising fees and having the facility open at the same time. So have not proposed any new fees there. The 3% is to recognize inflation rates, which are hovering near there at the moment, and just consideration of that as we build next year's budget.
Questions or comments about the proposed Parks, Recreation and Trails fees? Councilor Berry.
I support it's a nominal increase, especially with, you know, rising costs. The one area that I just wondered, I'm not necessarily requesting that the fee is changed, but given the fact that the rec center in Dorset has been closed for, you know, an extended period of time, if there's any consideration on an incentive on, I don't know about waiving fees or reducing fees or having some sort of an incentive. I just feel like maybe when we open up, the fees wouldn't begin until maybe a delayed increase or delayed start. But it just seems like an increase while the facility isn't available is maybe something we could.
Well, I thought we just said that those fees aren't being increased, but I do believe that if council wishes, or if the recreation committee wants to bring a recommendation forward, that there's some consideration for, you know, a set period of time. I don't know about waiving fees entirely, but there, you know, there's something I think that we can do in recognition of celebration of the new facility and acknowledgement of how long they've gone without it. But I think we need to, you know, proceed with some caution with respect to that, and that could be separate than the fees bylaw, could it not? If we made it, yeah. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Well, indeed, and this is, I guess this is separate to the fees bylaw. But on the same vein, I wonder if anyone recalls or can quickly calculate the folks that had memberships to the gym, for example, when the membership would have expired and whether that overlapped with when we closed the facility, et cetera, and whether that can be recouped in their membership. Or is that something we can still look at?
It is information that we have, and the decision was at the time to prorate, and we offered people the opportunity to take a refund or prorate, and only a couple of people took the refund. So there will be a number of prorated folks.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Richards.
So one of my biggest concerns here is that I find myself absent from actual costs. And while most of these fees, it doesn't really matter, some of them, to me, it does. Particularly on the backcountry campsites and the canoe type fees that I feel are going to non-residents of Algonquin Highlands, that I would like to see more transparently that we are in a full recovery, if not profit there. So that is giving benefit to the other recreation programs. Because I feel like although some of our residents use them, it's more geared to bringing tourism in, but the particular type of tourism this is bringing in is not contributing to our economy as significantly as something like our ski trails, where I certainly think our resorts, et cetera, are benefiting from that.
Any thoughts on that from other members of council or from yourself? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I fully understand that, and I recall we did have the conversation last year, and I believe we did agree to increase the rental fees and the campsite fees by a certain amount in order to reflect that in spirit, if not a full cost recovery. Is that my memory also playing up with me again?
Go ahead.
No, we hadn't changed fees beyond an inflation rate last year either. There hasn't been a comprehensive review of water trails fees. Probably 2016 would have been the last time. However, we are above similar backcountry rates for provincial parks that are offering similar services, such as Algonquin Park. But no, there hasn't been an increase beyond an inflation amount.
Is that something that council would like to see investigated, given that it's been quite some time since there was an in-depth review of particularly of the campsites? Go ahead.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Chris. What do you gross from backcountry camping, like ballpark? Anything
Oh,
else?
this year we had our anticipated revenues were approximately 295,000 for backcountry camping, 60,000 for canoe rentals.
And do you feel that the 290,000 is a 100% cost recovery?
Oh, that's reflected in the budget. You'd be
Yeah.
able to see that in your budget sheets, the difference, but no, we're at about 75% cost recovery for this year that we anticipated in the budget. Final numbers for that will be known at the end of the year, but we have already reached the anticipated amount. And if things continue, we'll likely exceed it. There are years that the budgeted amount, depending on what we need to do, what we need to purchase, what we're doing for staffing, puts the percentages closer to cost recovery. And there's some years that it's been fully cost recovery, but this year, for example, there was a truck purchase, we increased some staffing, et cetera. So it's a little bit higher. But it's typically in that kind of 70-80% general cost recovery range, I would say, average overall.
Councilor Barry.
I personally feel that, yes, there's, possibly a bigger increase that we could do, and that might come out through research or study. But I also think that there's a lot fewer things for families to do. And I feel that, with the increase of Airbnbs and short-term rentals, that having family vacations are becoming harder to do. And I feel that this is one of sort of the perks of being in a township with the trail system. So I'm not in support.
I hear what you're saying. I think that Councillor Richards was making a little bit different point that quite often the campsites are used by tourists and outsiders more than they are by local. And I don't know that. I mean, is there any way that you've got any kind of thoughts on the percentage use, whether they're locals or
There are
visitors?
local uses. I don't have exact numbers on that, no. But there are local users, absolutely. And something we're not able to track is local users of, like, this is just talking about campsites where we can look at people actually making reservations, but for hiking trails, for ski trails, people aren't giving us that kind of information, so we're not able to get it for that.
We're talking more about the campsites.
Just the campsites, yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Richards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really strictly talking about the campsites because I see them as benefiting non-residents substantially, that are not significantly contributing to our local businesses when they come up to our backcountry sites. I mean, I think that as far as our residents are concerned, I would be happy to see some kind of residential discount given to them. But I think we can afford to raise the rates higher than just 3% and still attract them and get closer to full recovery. And I'm not convinced entirely that, you know, we're maybe not getting more, because I do see that we may have allocated some costs there that having more appropriately spread out would make those numbers look differently. What I'm looking to see is realistically how we are cost recovery. In fact, I think it should be more than cost recovery in this case. I think we should be capitalizing on the tourism coming here to offset the other costs associated with that to our local residents.
I guess I would ask what your thoughts are, Councillor Barry, on the idea of possibly increasing the rates, but giving a discount to locals.
Well, in today's world of inclusion and diversity and equity, I kind of feel it goes against it, because the people that we're bringing into the campgrounds or backcountry places, you know, it might be that, you know, that sunset or that vista that they see that ends up making them become residents. So to me, I think it's maybe short-sighted.
Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I agree with both councillors. I think there is a very important piece of our puzzle, which is ensuring that there is good recreational, affordable opportunities for everyone. And if we can extend that beyond our borders to others in Ontario, with the gain that we may never see, which is an increased connection to nature, an increased appreciation of the importance of protecting it, et cetera, I think that is a good thing, and it's a service that we provide. I also very much think it's a great idea to do a bit of a study on those you know, on those prices. It doesn't mean we would change anything. It just means that we would take a look. And to the point that you made, if I understood correctly, and I agree with, you know, there may be some costs there to the township, which have been allocated across programs, which you know, maybe even if we increase the prices, or say we increase the prices, but there was a decline in people who came, the cost would remain the same. So, you know, there are certain fixed costs that are allocated in certain ways that won't really address cost recovery. I'm not explaining that very well. It's very, very clear in my mind. But I do appreciate the idea of the study, but I also very much concur that I'm not in principle in favor of increasing rates.
I guess this is something that we don't have to decide this today. I mean, we can, you know, Chris can give some consideration to, you know, have you got something you want to say? Okay.
Just on the decision today, because the fees that Chris has proposed, and you'll see it throughout in all the other departments, is it's before council today.
Fitting to the budget.
because we have to advertise and then we pass them before the end of the year, so that is reflected in our budget. So if council wants a study, if that's what you're calling it, to be done, it still won't be done by the end of the year, but can be looked at.
No,
for
I
next
think
year.
that's understood. Councillor Richards and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I'm sure people will start to book soon. We have to get the rates in place so that we don't have some confusion on who's paying what. So, I mean, I would be prepared to accept as presented.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, I do see it as entirely separate to today's decision, and I wouldn't even call it a study. I would probably just call it a review, wherein we put on an agenda a moment where we look at how the numbers wash out and see whether it's something that we want to revisit or not, but not undertake a time-intensive study.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say the word study, the word consultant comes into play and people start to get antsy and okay, so are there any other specific questions about the fees that are being proposed on this particular schedule? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive them? Okay, I thought that we would be just receiving them, not necessarily approving them, but okay, that's fine. Thank you for your work on this. And I'm sure that we put some food for thought.
Yeah, thank you.
So the item that we did add to the agenda was a discussion about compensation for Santa for the 3 tree lighting things. This is something that the rec committee had talked about, and there hasn't been time for the minutes to come and it'd be an official recommendation. The point being that Santa is now being asked to attend all 3 tree lightings as opposed to just a Stanhope, which takes a lot more time and mileage. Thoughts? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Would this include a carrot budget, or should we bring our own carrots? For the reindeer.
But
yeah, for the reindeer.
Oh, I think that whatever we agree to would probably include the carrots.
Include the carrots. Could we bring our own carrots anyway?
You're still going to have to compensate Santa's for, his, the carrots. I think this maybe is paying for the carrots.
Okay, okay.
Did you wish to speak to it then, and we'll go to you, Chris? Oh, okay.
What the committee had wanted to do in last night's discussion was provide a gift card for gas of $150.
Okay, I'm just thinking about where this is, is this a slippery slope or not, that we need to think about? Because Santa is volunteering to come to Algonquin Highlands, especially on those 3 particular nights, carrots or no carrots. I know that there has been some discussion in the past about compensation of mileage for our other volunteers, and I'm just afraid that we're going to lead into that. Not that I want to hold back from Santa at all. Okay, we have Chris and then Sabrina and then, I'm sorry, Councillor Richards and Councillor Sartreed.
Thank you. And just to add context, it would be the first time in my involvement that we've compensated a volunteer.
Councillor Richards.
I think we may want to start having that conversation about compensating volunteers on our committees. Volunteerism is significantly down. The cost of mileage, gas, etc., is rising. It may be worth revisiting that conversation overall in the long run.
Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
And this suggestion came from the volunteers on the committee who volunteer.
I understand.
I'm just saying though, it's the volunteers saying,
Let's pay Santa.
yeah, compensate Santa for actually coming out on nighttime to help out.
Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Barry.
Was Santa approached to say, would you please come, Santa? We would like you, or for me, there's a line there that supports avoiding a slippery slope wherein you know, this individual hasn't said, hey, what can I do? I want to join a committee. I want to be more involved. They've been purposefully asked to come out. And I see that as a little bit different. You know, we
In supporting the
yeah, so
compensation.
yeah, in support of the compensation, because we've effectively said, please come out and give your time, but also give $100 worth of your own money to do this for us, which we are asking you to do.
Councillor Berry.
I concur. I think it'd be different if there was three. If all three tree lightings were in the same part of the municipality, but given the distance, I think it's consideration. In the past, we've had different Santas come to different events.
Okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to move forward with compensation of Santa for carrots? Councillors, Madam Clerk.
Clarification, what would that remuneration be?
$50 for each tree lighting, so $150. That's what was being recommended. Madam CAO?
I think the recommendation was, if I heard Chris correctly, it was for a gas gift card. So is council wanting to just give $150, or are we giving a gift card for $150?
The idea of the gift card. Councillor Richards.
Actually, I do want to correct that a little bit. The suggestion from the volunteers was that it be in consideration of gas and mileage, but the actual suggestion was a Canadian Tire card that could be utilized either for gas or should you want to use it for something.
No, I personally, I think that the gas card is probably the most appropriate thing to do.
And would
That's
the
what we want to
committee-
compensate
Yeah,
him
I
for,
know.
really is.
So would the committee take care of that, or is that something that Township can take care of?
I would look to the CAO for a response to that.
I would think that since we have the access to the funds, like the committee wouldn't necessarily, they would have to pay for it and then hand it in for reimbursement, that we would look after.
It will have a resolution, so we can keep it simple. Councillor Berry?
Just in regards to mileage, did the committee discuss anything in regards to remuneration for the two furthest locations opposed to all three? Was that ever a discussion? I just think. No, okay.
Kind of getting into it a little bit. I mean, it's a pretty simple way to do it. And one is considerably further than the other. It's kind of averages it out. Could I have a mover and a seconder then to approve a $150 gas certificate or gas card? Councillors Shore Reid and Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Sherby, second by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that council approves remuneration in the amount of $150 fuel gift card for Santa's attendance at Algonquin Highlands tree lighting events.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up is environmental business. Good morning, Ms. Murray.
Morning, Mayor, Council.
So first up for you is the proposed fees and charges for environmental services.
Indeed. I have a little, quite a few changes proposed, and not on a set percentage according to inflation. A number of factors came into play in them. One, you'll see the addition of tonnage rates, which is new. So with the installation of the scale at the Maple Lake waste disposal site, those will be now required, and we've never had those in place before. So those are all new fees. And then direction has been given to look at bringing our fees in line to have some consistency across the county. So that has been taken into consideration with some of the fees I've proposed, as well as our costs of services. So those are sort of the background that have gone into those changes that I've proposed.
Was there a change to the, I understand there was a bit of a blip in the fees for boat disposal?
Yes, there is an error in the
It should be tons, not kilograms, is that?
yes, that is correct. Sorry, I just.
Questions or comments prior to that, Madam CAO?
I just want to bring to council's attention that there is a proposed change in currently we allow 1 cubic yard of household waste. There is a proposed change to that in a bag limit. Is to me is more of a philosophical question to council as well as a fees question. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Richards, Councillor Berry.
Yeah, I saw that and I thought that was great myself, in that if someone does just have a minimal amount, it offsets that for them, if I am understanding that correctly. So yes, I was in favor of that. And then I got a separate question on a separate point.
Okay, well, so we'll stick to the fee per bag. Councillor Richards.
My concern with the fee per bag, beyond 3 bags, is that due to the distance, a lot of people have adjusted their lifestyle to going less frequently to the landfill, and so therefore accumulating more when they do go. And that doesn't mean that they're,
Facing
creating
a greater
more.
burden.
It just means that they're not going as frequently, so they have more. And I think that I support that because it's less travel, it's less, vehicular usage. I don't think it's happening on a large scale from my understanding. In that everybody's coming with more than, 2 or 3 bags at a time. It's happening on people who are living farther away from the dump. And so they've set up processes where they only go maybe once every couple of weeks, even once a month, maybe in the winter. So I think limiting the bags, is unfair in those circumstances.
Councillor Berry.
Just following on that, my thought was, well, if that was the case of the 3 bags, then, you could go twice and then you could bring as much as you wanted and you wouldn't have to pay the fees. My thought with the bags and also just with the environmental impact of driving. I know as my parents have gotten older, we have been given the duty of taking their waste as well. So we're bringing 2 household wastes to the landfill. And how does that complicate things? Does that mean we now go twice? Or every time we go, we have to pay?
Because you're bringing 2 households.
Mm-hmm. And we might only go twice a month. So how does that work? I guess that would be a consideration. I personally feel that I understand the increase of having a bag fee. I totally understand that, but I feel that maybe something like 5 would be more of the standard than 3.
Other thoughts? Councillor Richards.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're just going to get around it if you have more to go day after day after day with multiple trips. And then you're actually creating more vehicular usage and pollution. So I just don't think that we should limit it. I don't think people in general are, actively creating additional waste than they should. I think most people are recycling. I think it's pretty common. People show up with 2 bags and 6 bags of recycling. So putting a limit on it, I could see when you're sending out a truck and you're doing garbage pickup, you have to manage the flow into that truck. But when we're in an environment where that's not the case and people are traveling to go somewhere to deliver their garbage, I don't think it's necessary.
So just for clarification, though, we currently limit it. It is currently limited to 1 cubic yard. So maybe Melissa could help us with what in a cubic yard, generally, how many bags would that be?
Cubic yard, and like you say, generally it depends on the size of the bag, that's the thing, but about 10 bags is generally
really?
considered to be a
Yeah,
cubic
so
yard.
there's a difference. So.
And if I may, just this was data I collected a few years ago. It's a fairly extensive bit of work to get these numbers. But about 98% of residents at that time were bringing less than 5 bags, and about 85% were bringing 3 bags or less. So as Councillor Richards mentioned, the limits affect a smaller number of people. The majority of our population is bringing between 1 and 3 bags. That number was it was set in keeping with Minden and Dysart, who have both are at 3 bags now, and it is a typical starting point. I would say generally when bag limits are put in place to look at reducing the amount of waste that people are producing, and putting a value to it and setting a sort of a standard to it. I'm just providing that as information that,
No, that's fine.
where we want to go with that's entirely up to council. And I've just gave us a starting point. So
I think that you're hearing at this point in time that we don't want to make a change. Yes or no? As Lisa Berry would say, yes or no? I'm kind of hearing, from at least a couple of members that they're not keen on making that particular change. You want to comment on that?
It's not my hill. I like the proposal, but it's, I'll go with the will with council. Yeah.
Councillor Shortreed.
Same for me, because I've always had it stuck in my head and I don't know why that I only can take 2 bags. I don't know where it came from, but I go to dump every week, so I can't speak to anybody else, but.
Deputy Mayor Diane.
So the data collection that you just referred to, is it ongoing in such a way that if in a year you came back and you said, whoa, it looks like a lot more people are combining recycling in household waste because it's cheaper for them to do so than the, hassle of taking it and separating it out. Is that something that you could keep an eye on or not as per your usual data gathering protocol?
Just to clarify, so you're wondering what the contamination rate of recycling would be, whether there'd be more garbage in the recycling, and that's certainly something that we do keep attention on, and that is something that the attendants, when they're checking loads, come in do, and that was another proposal, was to look at bringing into effect a fee if you're bringing in contaminated material. So household garbage, if there's more than 10% recycling in it, there would be an additional charge for that, because now that's recycling material that the township is having to handle as waste. And the same with recycling, to have a fee in place if there's recycling that has a large amount of garbage in it, more than 5%, because then the township is incurring a cost to manage that contamination as well. So on in both directions, looking at that, and again, just sort of monetize that the expectation still is that people do separate their waste and do that work, but that there is a cost to the township if that work isn't done, and looking at that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Although if we're looking at no change and not the 5 bag change, then it actually doesn't make much of a difference.
It's a bit of, but that's a separate item, and it was one of an item that I wanted to ask about. If we're looking at greater contamination, are we just going to charge the person but still throw it into household waste, or are we going to get into actually separation, and does that start looking like we need more attendance? Like I just wanted to know what the intention was there. If it was like, say somebody brought in a bag and you could see that it was 1/3 of it was recycling material, they would just have to pay and then it would go into household waste.
Yes, essentially that's what would happen at this time. that waste might just be refused entirely. Because but we don't have a set standard in place. We do say that recycling is mandatory, but we've never given a value to that. So this is adding some quantification to that. And we would have to handle it as waste because we don't have the resources. We're not actually separating and that sort of thing. So
that was my concern.
and once it becomes waste, then there's obviously the cost of waste disposal for it.
I actually did like the idea. If you could see that there was more than, say, like 30%, I'm just using that as a number, that you're going to refuse it, which is makes the person go home and have to separate it themselves and bring it back, which is kind of what you want to see happen. Councillor Richards and then Councillor Barry.
Yeah, and Melissa, I want to thank you because we spent several hours on the phone going through line by line. And yeah, so our current process is that we refuse it if it's mixed contamination garbage. So increasing, decreasing the bag limit really is irrelevant to recycling because we deal with that separately. If the garbage comes in at 10 bags and a portion of it is recyclable material, right now we would refuse it. This suggestion here is to charge for it. My personal would be to continue to refuse it, make them take it home and learn their lesson. But I understand, that's easier said than done when staff are dealing with somebody and getting into disputes with them about it and then therefore charging them, it at least helps staff to come up with a solution on the spot when they're dealing with them.
Councillor Barry.
I support the fee for contaminated waste opposed to just refusal. I think just refusal, yeah, the average person might come home and sort it. There's another person that could just
heave it
somewhere else. My one question with that is that just going to be a sporadic observation, or like how do you actually logistically do that in regards to charging fees for that? Especially I'm thinking, some of the trucks, or you can't see what's in someone's back seat, that type of thing.
I think something that comes up in waste, and that is, the goal is to educate, we don't want to be penalizing people. Having a fee in place, as I mentioned, it gives a monetary value essentially to that work. If somebody decides, no, they're not going to do that work and they want to pay the fee, it at least provides some compensation for that. But our first goal obviously is to educate people and help them to meet the requirements and to ensure that waste is, I would say, as far as how it's enforced, education first. If it's a reoccurring, issue, it's a tool that can be used to help to put a value to that. If somebody comes in and, they're, with a lot of things in waste, we have to use some compassion sometimes and some judgment, but that is the standard that it needs to be, and we have that in writing essentially, and so that's the expectation, and people are aware of what the expectation is, and then we want to support them with education and assistance at the site, even with meeting that expectation.
So what I'm hearing is that we want to stick with the status quo when it comes to the number of bags. So no change there. But we're good with the changes that are being suggested for the mix. We've got a lot more items on this list that we've got to talk about. I just want to point that out. Councillor Barry.
I think, I'm not saying that I will never support an increase in the bags.
But for now,
now.
yeah. Are we generally agreed on that one item? Okay. Councillor Richards.
I do just want to say that I do have a concern overall in these fees, that with our current climate economically, that by trying to align our fees with other municipalities that you don't have a landfill, that have higher costs, etc., that they have to recoup, that we are proliferating people into other methods of disposal that we don't want. I have been getting more and more complaints, not necessary complaints, but information to me that people are taking to burning their own garbage or going back to the old days of burying it in the woods behind them. And every time we raise these fees, although I want to see cost recovery in specific areas, I do get concerned that we're making that more and more difficult.
I guess from my perspective, I can see that the percent increase based on the cost of living is a lot more palatable and understandable. Because I mean, that's all clear. We can all see that, but this and I also see the rationale for trying to streamline things and, you know, do things sort of this in a similar way across the county, but it's got to be justifiable, as you say, that there's some municipalities that are operating a little bit differently than we are, and their fee structure might be not necessarily in line with us, but I mean, that's what we pay Melissa to look at and consider. That I would hate to think that we're just simply changing, like, I don't want to use the word jacking up, but increasing prices dramatically because that's what's being done in another municipality for possibly a specific reason. Anyway, any other thoughts on that train of thought? Are there other specific issues, items that you want to raise, Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Could you talk us through the decision on the fee change for mulch and yard waste? Because I think it's double what was before. And in philosophy, I agree. We want to, presuming this is what's behind it, we want to avoid those sorts of materials coming into the landfill. We want people to leave them on site, let them compost naturally. At least that's where I'm going in my mind with that fee increase. But could you talk us through what your rationale is?
To you, Mayor. Absolutely. So a couple of things come into there. The fee for leaf and yard waste certainly is to encourage diversion of those materials from landfill. The only thing that we can do with them when we receive them at landfill is landfill them. So they have at least the same value as monetary cost as garbage. So they essentially are garbage now. The proposed fee was coming in line with county, as well as bringing it in line with brush, so that brush and leaf and yard waste were the same fee. And it gets more difficult especially when you're scaling weights and that sort of thing, to have those materials separated. So that wouldn't be necessary if they were at the same rate. And really, both of those materials we'd like to have diverted from landfill. Obviously, brush has a few more challenges for people to manage, and it has more cost for the municipality to manage because we do have to chip it and handle it and that sort of thing. But they are similar materials as far as they become landfill. Until such time as, you know, we could look at a diversion program that the municipality could offer. Right.
Go ahead.
Is there a lot of that comes in? If there is a lot, would a diversion program be your recommended plan of action to consider for council?
It's not a lot, and that is one of the challenges with that to bring a leaf and yard waste program into effect, just with regulation and that sort of thing. But it certainly, you know, is something to be considered, and if there's the opportunity for it, absolutely. Like with many of the other materials I've spoken about, the best way to divert it is to keep them from coming to the landfill at all. And particularly leaf and yard waste, we are a forested, you know, area, and those are we'd like to return, you know, those nutrients and that to the soil if at all possible. So I'd look at landfilling of them as sort of our last resort, and look at promotion and education and other supports for people to manage those materials on their own, and fees, you know, could be looked at to help support that as well.
Councilor Berry.
With that, is there any increase of fire if people are discarding them on their own property?
There's still burning regulations that they have to follow.
And I wouldn't be suggesting that they be burnt. No.
Other specific items on this list of fees? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Can we talk about furniture? I like that you want to differentiate upholstered furniture from non-upholstered furniture. I think that's a really good change. I'm still a little worried about, you know, what about the person who comes with 4 ancient plastic deck-like chairs, but the small ones that were flimsy to begin with, and would they be paying $60 to dispose of those, where someone else who, you know, brings in maybe a couple of big plastic or wooden tables would be charged the same per item? And I know it's so hard to know where to stop the differentiation, but it's something that's kind of in my craw a little bit, that one.
I get through you. The furniture is a challenging one, and that is a fee that came into place, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And that was because we had previously always measured furniture by the cubic yard. And so all of our bulky waste was by the cubic yard, and that included furniture. But that was very challenging for people. You know, you wanted to know, if I bring my table in, how much is it going to cost? And we didn't have a fixed sort of fee for it. And now that we have a minimum charge of $15 for bulky waste and construction material, they would be subject to that $15. This is a slight increase over that, but that was where the $15 sort of got set from, was based on that. It is a tricky one for sure. And you know, and how that you know, is reflected, because in some cases it does work out. You know, they're broken up chairs, they're in there with all a bunch of construction material and stuff. They do get charged as bulky construction material, and that would be at the cubic yardage rate of whatever rate that is there. So,
Other questions? Councillor Richards.
I mean, I do kind of see Deputy Mayor Dayu's point, because something like that, a plastic chair that probably didn't even cost $60 to begin with, is a challenge. And again, I see these sometimes, because it, you know, is construed as very high, very expensive. These are the types of things where people are leaving the dump, throwing them in the forest, and going on their way because they're just annoyed. And we have great people around us that go around cleaning up the forests and the neighborhoods, but they are starting to get annoyed. I'm hearing that quite often. So that's the problem that we see when we make the fees too high.
Okay, any other specific changes to this set of fees? Okay, so we will receive that and move on to the your services activity report. I'm sorry, did I miss a question? Okay.
I just
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, the decision was not to change the cubic yard bag limit for household garbage.
Correct.
But I had proposed a change in the fee as well, and I'm just wondering whether that was to keep that fee, or obviously we take out the $5 per bag would be gone, but moving from 35 to 45 for the cubic yardage if it's above the 1 cubic yard.
Thoughts? Any concerns? Oh, so we're good to go there.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Sorry, I'm not a math person, so you'll have to forgive, but it would occur to me that a $5 per bag increase over 3 standard bags comes out less than the $45 per cubic yard if there are up to 10 bags that can fit into a cubic yard. So if you're charging so I can see the scratching of the brow there. Maybe someone could just walk me through the math, because from what I understand, you've got your regular 3 standard bags, and anything beyond that would be charged as a square, as a cubic yard. No, okay. Then I misunderstood.
And maybe, Melissa, you maybe have to, but from what I am understanding, if you were gonna go 3 bags, you would have 3 bags free, and then after 3 bags, you'd pay $5 per bag. If we stick with a cubic yard, you get a cubic yard, which is generally 10 bags. And then over and above that, you pay $45 per cubic yard.
I understand.
You good? All right.
If I can
Your month-
clarify as
yeah.
well, you are correct, and the math doesn't add up. 10 bags at $5 a bag is $50. And there is a bit of calculation that goes in there. Typically, when it's only 1 bag, it tends to be a larger bag. If it's a lot of bags, they tend to be smaller bags. So the bag number is always a bit, as we said, is always a bit of a tricky thing. So that was just a way to, have some accounting for that variation in there.
Your monthly activity report, please.
Like you say, the 5 bag or the bag cost is gone. So that's all good. Okay. Moving along. Wrong report here. I apologize. So for October, we, as council had seen, we finally have in place our agreement with Circular Materials. So that's nice to see for our transition period starting March 31st of 2024. Just so you have a bit of an update now, moving forward, we'll be looking and working with the logistics side of that and how that's actually going to be put into effect. We have the agreement, but there's still a lot of logistics to work out with that. So I just did want to take note that we did review the operations at the Maple Lake site as far as staffing. We did increase the staffing this summer with the new transfer station or with the new operations center there, just to help people get used to it and get on board with how that was operating. So we have reduced the staffing back to its usual levels, and we'll keep an eye on things as they go and see if that's meeting the needs. So far, so good, but it is something obviously that to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that was it was necessary to do what we did this summer to really help people become accustomed to the new system, just to show them how it all worked. And yeah, we'll see how it goes going forward. Any comments or questions on the monthly activity report? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive it? It's Councillors Richards and Shortreed. And finally, your recommendation and report on a site attendant, and I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Moved by Councillor Richards, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council receives report EB 2923 regarding monthly activities submitted by Melissa Murray for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Sorry. Site attendant and maintenance services.
Thank you. Just looking for some direction from council on how you'd like to proceed with this. Our current agreement with Watson General Contracting ends on March 31st, 2024. Our current agreement did have clauses for renewal, but we are at the end of that renewal period. So this would be for council to decide whether we'd like to move forward with sole source procurement and negotiating with our existing contractor, or to begin a competitive process through an RFP or something else as council may direct.
From what I understand, the last time that we actually put out an RFP for services, our general contractor was the only one to respond.
And that has been the same for Algonquin Highlands as well as Minden. They didn't receive any other bids on their last RFP as well, which was more recent than our last one. It's been a few years since we've put out an RFP.
Well, and I mean, from my observation, it's been a reasonably good working relationship that we've had with them. Thoughts or questions from council? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Option 1.
Thoughts from other members of council? Could I have a mover and a seconder to move forward with option one? Councillors Barry and Deputy Mayor Dayoud. That was simple.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Dayoud. Be it resolved, council receives report EP 3023 regarding site attendant and site maintenance services procurement submitted by Melissa Murray, and the council directs staff to proceed with option one and be brought back to council for approval.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is Public Works. Morning, Mr. Thorne.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
So first is your list of proposed fees and charges.
Yes, thank you. So for this year, we were just basically going with the standard 2.5% to 3% increase across the board. Some of the areas that you'll see that we did not make any increases were within the cemetery for interment rights, sales, open and closes. We feel at this time we are at a cost recovery, so we are meeting what it takes to open and close a grave currently. So we didn't make any increases in there. Other than that, across the board, it was just the standard increase annually. And in regards to the fees for the entrance permit and the occupancy road occupancy permit, there was a $50 increase on the non-refundable administration fee. In the past year, we've noticed an increase on these permits and staff time to go out multiple times for the inspections.
Questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Dayoud.
Thanks, Adam. A question about airport parking. Aircraft parking. The month and the yearly fees in particular, does that mean that someone could come into Stanhope Airport, put their aircraft on the side at an appropriate place on the side of the runway and then just leave it there for the remainder of the year and not really think about it again until they want to come back and use it? Is that what that means?
That's correct. So at the airport, there are two locations for exterior parking for aircraft, our infield and then the terminal area, sorry, not the terminal, the tarmac area, there are parking. If long-term parking is expected through the conversation with the person parking their plane and the management staff, we generally direct them to park in the midfield in the grass area where there's tie downs. If it's something that they're just going to be parking for the month and going to be going in and out, well, then we would direct them to park it off of the tarmac area.
And that's rarely overloaded.
I'm sorry.
It's rarely overloaded on the tarmac area.
No, this summer alone, I think we had 3 planes that were parked there regularly, but they were also flying in and out regularly. We do have 1 plane currently that does sit there or has been there for almost a year now, and it barely goes out. It just actually recently was moved to the infield for winter operations.
Go ahead.
Could you speak to how you arrived at this amount, that figure, or why you think that's the appropriate figure for us? Just that if you want to park your car somewhere for a whole year, it's probably going to cost you much more than that.
Thousands of dollars.
Yeah, depending on where you are. And I just wonder if we could chat about that a bit.
Yeah, so the fees for parking were established well before I was in this position. So just as time has gone on, we've made the increases annually. That's basically it.
So there's been no specific cost comparison done with other airports of, say, similar size to ours, rural type airports?
No, not to date.
This may be something we could do. Is that what you were going to suggest? But for now, we'll leave it as it is. Go ahead.
Absolutely. For this year, let's keep it as is. And then as time progresses, consider that maybe for next year's budget.
Any other questions or comments on the Public Works fees and charges? Okay, So you're good to go there. Your monthly activity report. Any highlights that you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple that I would like to make. Under the airport, we've had a couple issues with our fuel master system that we've been working through. The reason I'd like to highlight that is that when the fuel system is down, we're not able to provide fuel. So a NOTAM is issued once we're aware of it. When the NOTAM is issued, that gets sent out to all airmen that we have no fuel, and then there's a set time when the NOTAM will be lifted. So unfortunately, last month and so far this month, we've had quite a few issues with the fuel master system that we're currently working through. It's been a joint effort between fuel master, IT, and staff here as well. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we've had some issues with it. We've had quite a few shutdowns, but we are working on it, and we're trying to source out a long-term fix for it.
Would you say that that contributes substantially to the amount of fuel that's sold?
In relation, you think like more fuel that we sell, it's more wear and tear on the machine? Is that
No, I was just thinking, were there enough shutdowns that we were actually not able to sell as much fuel?
Honestly, no, I don't think that was for the longest period so far, with the fuel system being shut down, we were less than a week. But we were able to still provide fuel through our ProKey system, which ProKeys are only given out to the likes of like Hydro, Orange, M&R, things of that nature. So I don't feel
Basically for emergency use.
Yeah, yeah.
The reason I bring up the issue of fuel, we talked about fuel prices, just before the fly-in, and there was a little bit of discussion about fuel prices and some concern that we were charging quite a bit more than other airports that are equal to ours. And the concern, when you look at the numbers of what we've sold, as far as liters of fuel compared to last year, there's a considerable drop. And I have been hearing anecdotally that pilots are flying over Stanhope to go and buy fuel somewhere else. So, that kind of leads us to, can we look at some consideration for fuel prices and whether there's an ability to lower the price to a certain extent so that we're more competitive with other airports. And then I see that we would probably increase our sales even though we've reduced the price. So it would balance out and maybe even put us in a better position. We're looking for thoughts on asking for that work to be done.
Yes, thank you. And through you, I did bring that report forward showing a couple different options if we decreased it from the 32% markup to the 25 to a 20 and so on. So I was going to bring something forward at the budget discussion that will reflect more of a markup around the 15% mark, which would keep us relatively close to the lower side of fuel sales in the area.
Okay, that'd be great. Look forward to that.
Okay. In addition to that, on my monthly report, there's a couple other items I'd like to bring up or mention would be, we've had a couple large breakdowns on our equipment, unfortunately. One being the motor grader that we have, which you'll see further in my report coming up. But actually, it's since been repaired and it's now back in the fleet operating today, to my knowledge. The breakdown of our New Holland tractor, which this time of year, we actually use that for our roadside brushing. So unfortunately, we've haven't been able to complete that. And we're trying to get the machine up and running before the winter sets in, because we do use that machine for snow blowing on our roads and at our airport. Its main use is at our airport, and then it gets moved out into the roads as needed. So we're hoping to have that repaired sooner than later, but I wanted to bring that to your attention as well, that we're noticing some larger repairs to this equipment.
Is there any warranty on the home tractor?
No, unfortunately not. Warranty on most equipment only lasts generally a year. And if we do...
Until it breaks down.
Yeah. In addition to that, we've had another failure of a generator at the Public Works Garage on North Shore Road. So through discussion with the CAO, we were able to have that generator replaced by the same company that replaced the one in Oxtongue. And it was replaced yesterday. So we were able to get it up and running in a decent amount of time, given the season that we're about to come into. For roads and streetlights, I also wanted to bring up two items on this one, and it refers back to the grader being broke down. We did have to have a rental grader come in with an operator to cover our roads, getting them prepped and ready for the season. So that has been completed. The contractor that we used offered up the grader and and an operator, and was very efficient getting around grading our roads for us in a timely manner. So that was great for them to be able to help us out with that, as well as rebuilding the McPhail Road project. Given the time of year, we have half of that project completed, and you'll see that come back at projects and priorities in the budget for next year for us to complete that.
Questions on the monthly report? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive it? Councillor Short-Reed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be resolved, the council receives report PW 2823 regarding monthly activities submitted by Adam Thorne for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is replacement of a grader.
Yes, unfortunately, as I mentioned, that we are seeing quite a few breakdowns. The breakdowns are a result of purely the age of the machine. None of the breakdowns that I've mentioned so far have been staff related to misuse. So we're starting to see that the more and more we get age in this machine, that it's being it's just not it's not fulfilling its needs for us, and we're spending more time with it being broke down, the repairs to have it fixed, and then having it shipped to Aurelia, which is where the closest dealer is that can fix the machine. The most recent breakdown was a computer. Thankfully, they were able to find a used one for us. A brand new one was just over double the cost of this repair. So, and they're becoming very, very rare to find. So I would like to propose that we remove this machine from our fleet, and we purchase a new one as soon as possible.
Probably the more cost-effective thing to do in the long run.
I think that the longer we started to notice that the maintenance on this, and like I said in my report, we do a great job on trying to project annual maintenance costs that we know are coming up, things of services and breakdowns that we're somewhat able to predict. But everything this year so far has been out of our control and not what we were prepared for. So I think that if we were able to move forward with the purchase of a new one and then have this one surplus while it's still in good working order, we should see decent money come back for it and then help offset.
So are you, just to be clear, are you asking for pre-approval, or are you asking for this to be included in our projects and priorities in this coming budget?
So what I'm asking for is pre-approval to go to the RFP process, which we would go right away. And then I would bring the price back for the purchase of it for further approval through council.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Would this come out of reserves?
That's correct. Currently, between discussions between the treasurer and the CAO, we all feel that we should be able to cover the cost of this through our reserve.
Councillor Barry.
In your report, you state utilizing municipal discounts like LAS. Is that something that will be in the RFP, or is that something that will be done alongside?
Yeah, so that is something that we will be looking into. Once again, we'll be utilizing the county to help us out with the RFP for this. And I have spoken to a couple of the dealerships to make sure that they are following along with municipal discounts such as this. So yes, we will be utilizing those funding opportunities. Yep.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to move forward with this acquisition? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Short-Reed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Counselor Burt Reed. Be it resolved that council receives report PW 2923 regarding equipment replacement grader submitted by Adam Thorne, and that council authorizes staff to proceed with the replacement of the grader in 2024, 2 years ahead of his expected life cycle through a request for proposal bid process.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, update on the Dorset Rec Center.
Yeah, so on the Dorset Rec Center, I was really hoping to be able to come to council today with a design plan for the interior and the exterior facade. Unfortunately, we were not able to do that due to getting prices for both the interior and the exterior. Given the season and the time of year with hunting and a couple other problems that we've run into along the way, there was a delay. So I'm hoping to get that back to you as soon as possible. We have stressed again to the contractor how important it is to get these prices in as soon as possible so we can keep this rolling. Unfortunately, due to that, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Fortunately, even though we are seeing a delay in the pricing, they are still working in the interior of the building. So although nothing's happening on the outside currently, they are still working within the building, replacing the drywall and continuing to move forward. So they're not sitting still.
So this won't necessarily create any delay in the long run.
In the long run, no, this should not create any delay for us to be open at the scheduled time. What might happen, just given the season and now looking at the forecast in the next 2 weeks, the amount of snow they're calling for, it will delay potentially the exterior finishes, which may have to be done in the spring.
But we would still be able to open it because the interior work is done. Okay, that's the key.
Yes.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna call for a break. Sorry to you too. For half an hour, if that's enough. So we'll reconvene at 20 to 1. For fire services.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council.
First up are your proposed fees and charges.
Yes, there's 3 proposed fees that we have. The first one is for fire incident reports. And it's been put to $100 to be consistent with our other departments for file searches within Algonquin Highlands.
What was it?
It was
Prior.
previously 50. So if somebody applied for file search through the building department, they were being charged 100. Then they did the same search through the fire department. They're only charging 50. So now they're the same. The second one is response to unauthorized outdoor burning during a fire ban. So the charges we are looking at is $1,000. The difference with it being a fire ban is the previous one is just for any unauthorized burning, and it's done at MTO rates of $540 and based on responses. If we have this other one put in place for this, it doesn't have to be a cost recovery. It can be done by myself or an officer responding. So we don't have to implement a whole fire department. And the impact of it being under fire ban, I think it's appropriate with that cost. And it's common in other departments, not within the county, but other fire departments do have this fee for service in it. The last one that I'm proposing is an installation of a smoke CO alarm at $100 per alarm. Part of the Operation Safer that I attended in the spring is fire departments are going to places and putting up smoke alarms at the cost of the fire department. So if we put up a CO/smoke alarm, each one we put up costs us approximately $75. What the Ontario Fire Marshal's office is saying, we've had the law since 1997 that you have to have working smoke alarms on each floor of your house. And why should you be rewarding them for not complying with the bylaw? So at this way, it's basically just covering our costs. So if we go into a person's house for a medical or a fire call, they don't have the appropriate detectors there. we're cost recovering for a detector at that cost. And then it'll be, if it's, the secondary part of that is we are at our county fire chiefs in December. We have the Ontario Fire Marshal coming in to show us how to do proper tickets for people, for like renters that take down smoke alarms and that, because it isn't the responsibility of the landlord. So then we can actually give them the ticket, and the ticket that gets issued would be $360. And so it's just being proactive. So we're getting compliance for our requirement of FPPA through enforcement.
So does that include the device?
Yes. Correct.
Questions? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
A question on the fire ban, just for clarification then, you're saying prohibitions on daytime fire would not be included or would be included under this definition of fire ban?
On a regular daytime fire, when there's no fire ban in place, it'd be what we have currently happening, $540 per truck that responds to the scene. It's during the fire ban where it's a more elevated level of awareness of no burnings.
Right, when we got the red signs and.
Correct.
everything else.
And again, it stops us from having our volunteers have to respond.
Yeah.
We can just have 2 firefighters or myself respond and do the ticket for it.
Okay.
Or the fees or services.
Go ahead.
And then my other question, when you conduct a fire incident report, what are the steps involved in that? Is it just pulling something from a file or what, what's involved?
It'll be going on the computer and checking our records to see if we have anything for the address. It normally would be involved in a real estate transaction, just to see that there's no outstanding violations of the fire department.
Just, it feels high if it's just a few minutes pulling of a report. It just feels a little bit high.
Thoughts from other members of council? Councillor Shortreed?
Did you not say that building and bylaw charged the
Correct.
$100 too?
It's the same, the same that we already established $100 fee through building for the exact same transaction. So it's for consistency across the township.
Anybody else got a concern with that? Okay. Any other questions on the schedule of fees for the fire department? Okay, we're good to go then with that. On to your monthly activity report.
Excuse me, a couple of things I'd like to highlight. We have awarded the RFP for the master fire plan. It's been awarded to Lumix Group.
I'm sorry, to who?
Lumix. They a company that there's 3 proposals and they rated the best numbers. All 3 were quality proposals, but I think we'll get a very effective and efficient results from this program. So it has been awarded, and I would anticipate it all being completed by the end of May for next year.
And it was within our budgeted amount?
Correct. Correct. It was below our budgeted amount, and they were the #1 recommendation. Second thing I'd like to highlight is the training. If you look under the training division, they have been busy the last little while, and a lot of specific things. They did their ATV refresher training with the hunting seasons coming up. We're doing ice water awareness training online, and we require that to do our ice water program that we teach here at Algonquin Highlands. So we have to have them take that prior. So we're getting people ready for that. And like I said, they've been busy, and that means all the volunteers have too. So it's really nice to see.
Any questions on the monthly report? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillor Shortreed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, Council receives report FD 1723 regarding monthly activities submitted by Michael French, and that Council accepts with regret the resignation of Cole Newton from Station 80 effective October 25th, 2023.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Enjoy your afternoon.
Next up is finance business. Welcome, Madam Treasurer. First are your proposed fees and charges.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, we have a few changes to the administration fees after reviewing the neighboring municipality charges and so forth. First is under the administration side, we are suggesting a new charge for commissioning services. We see people coming in daily requesting commissioner signatures, so this is a fee for that service. $10 per document is a kind of a standard across the board.
How many people do we have in the office that are able to commission a document?
I believe it's 4. Yes, just doing quick math.
This is out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Right, go ahead.
Next, we're suggesting that we increase our tax certificate fee. So this is a fee that realtors and lawyers and so forth will pay when there's a property sold or whatever. And we again have looked at the other municipalities and are recommending we change ours or increase ours from existing $50 to $75.
Councillor Barry.
The commissioner charge, where is that in this report?
At the beginning.
It's at the very beginning in green.
Oh, got it. I thought it was $25.
And yes, we didn't have that fee in the past. Continue on, the next fee that we are recommending is actually for the tax sale administration fee. When we send the file for processing, again, in comparison and review of the other municipalities, we are recommending that we change ours from the existing $100 to a $250 charge. Because we have to do all the histories and provide all the details to the third party to get the process underway. So there's a lot of back and forth and file looking up its research.
So, not to be cheeky, but when you do a review of the fees with the other municipalities, is there a justification for the fee? Like, I mean, does anybody actually look at, here's how many hours? I know that they probably, many of them differ so that you kind of have to work out an average cost per certificate or, per sale. Or did you just look at the highest fee and everybody landed there?
Well, we compared the fees and we're trying to keep things across the board
I
evenly
understand that.
because of people having properties at different in neighboring municipalities. But it is considering the fact that there could be hours involved and it varies from property to property. I can't say that it's going to be a 10-hour process but it is taking away staff time from their regular
no doubt about it.
jobs to deal with the situation. And it's kind of like a user pay situation where it's to deal with that one property. So
Well, and I would suspect that there may be properties that actually cost more than, so this isn't an average.
exactly.
Okay. Questions, comments on this fee schedule?
I do have one more, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The other one that we
Oh.
ran into last year was the tax sale tender package. There's a lot of documents involved in the tax sale tender package. And if people are registered with the other sites that they are advertised with, they have to pay a fee to get them, even with those registrations. So municipalities do have the authority to charge for the tender sale packages as well. And again, it's because of photocopying and paper and people's time to prepare the packages and so forth. So this is a nominal fee just to cover those costs.
Questions? Okay. Next would be your appointment of the auditor. And I think we had agreed to that, hadn't we? This is just the bylaw associated with that, okay? So finally, the account summary.
Yes, and again, it's just our counts from October 10th to November 8th for council's review and comment and approval.
Any questions on the account summary? Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve it? Deputy Mayor Dayu and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council has reviewed the expenditures incurred as set out in the account summary report in the total amount of $1,542,498.13 and hereby approves payment of same.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, everyone.
So the next item under administration business is the change date for projects and priorities, and I think we've all basically acknowledged that we're good to go with that date, but we just wanted to formalize that. So do we need to have a resolution with respect to that?
No, that's fine. We'll just put out notice accordingly to re-advertise.
Okay,
And I do believe we can get it back into the paper in time as well.
thank you for your flexibility on that. To know that I thought it was important that everybody be at that particular meeting. Councillor Barry.
So just to confirm, it's the 30th?
Yep.
November at 9 o'clock?
Yep. Okay, under external boards, board meetings. Anything on either the Dorset Partnership or the Health Hub?
The Health Hub just had theirs a few weeks ago. The partnership, I don't think now we'll be able to have one due to the weather, and there's nowhere. The church is closed for renovations. The senior center is closed for renovations and the rec center is closed. So they're having a hard time finding somewhere to have it. Too cold for the pavilion. So the plan is once the rec center is open that they're gonna have it there or the church is done.
You can't meet via Zoom.
They can or they can't.
They can't?
Well, they could, but they usually want the whole, like the last time, there's probably 30 people in the church for it. They get a lot of participation because they invite the public too.
Okay, anything on the hub?
That was just like 3 weeks ago, so no.
Minutes?
I'm sorry.
Is there minutes?
We had them last council.
Okay.
Anything on Upper Trent Water Management Partnership?
The Upper Trent Water Management has scheduled a date for a meeting in December. December 4th, I think.
Okay.
So that's good. And nothing new on the Muskoka watershed.
Nothing on community policing. I expect that we will have a meeting scheduled fairly shortly for that. And I'm scheduled to go to Eastern Ontario Regional Network meeting next week. So no news there. What say you about the library board?
Library board, the happy news there is that the library board itself has confirmed it would like to see a formal request to Algonquin Highlands to open up a space within the Dorset Recreation Center. So that's good.
Thanks very much. So the news from the library board is that they have agreed unanimously to proceed with a request to Algonquin Highlands Council to open up a section of the Dorset Rec Center for library services. So that's nice. There's 10 pieces of tandem work happening between the board and staff and council to see if we can make that happen. And I remain very positive about that. So that's a huge thing for, for us up in Algonquin Highlands. It's really, really big. I think that's probably the biggest piece of news on that front, but nothing, we will see that come to council at the right moment.
And the only concern that I might have is that they were quite specific about the amount of square footage required, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to be that precise. It'll be a room or, spaces that we have available, whatever the square footage is. So we'll see what the official request is. I guess there was one other piece of news that was not really all that fabulous, but in that they had hired and were really excited about getting a new CEO, and she had lots of experience and has decided that she can't join us, so they're going back out. Right?
Yes, I don't believe there was a formal hiring. I don't know where in the offer process they got, but I don't think there had been a signed contract and which was then rescinded. It's just disappointing setback in the process of hiring. Yeah.
Anything on community safety and well-being?
Yeah, a couple points that I'd like to mention. On November 30th, Service Canada is going to be coming to the County of Haliburton office in order to provide general Service Canada services. So things that people would be able to go to apply for or to undertake would be social insurance numbers, passports, CPP, EI, and GIS. In the previous times when Service Canada has come to County of Haliburton for these outreach programs, there have been folks from Algonquin Highlands who have gone. So I think the more we can let people know that that's happening and is available to us, that would be just great. And then the second thing that I'd like to note, which is an interesting happening, and I think we should all keep our eye plugged on it a little bit to see what might emerge for the use by this council in the future, is that there is a community mobile outreach team that looks at housing and homelessness, mental health, access to services, etc. in the county. And it includes outreach workers from HHS Mental Health, John Howard Society, Harm Reduction, the City of Kawartha Lakes Housing and Homelessness Client Services worker is involved as well. And of course, they're our service provider for the county, so that makes a great deal of sense. And they're going around to various parts of the county. I would like to say all parts of the county to trying to find some more usable data on homelessness, problems with accessing service, transportation, mental health support, a whole range of things, just to bring us up to a better information level upon which we can make good decisions in the future. So let's keep an eye out for that as we move ahead.
I wonder with respect to the first workshop you talked about, if we can maybe somehow coordinate with Chad or get Chad to contact Sue and get something on our website. Able to do that. Okay. Anything on climate action plan?
We continue to meet and we'll bring something forward when there's something meaty there, but so far it's all great. And as last time, we have some really, really great heads on that committee. It's an impressive list.
I was really glad to see the positive response to the food recycler, that doubling the program from last year, and it was great because last year there was quite a bit of pushback on the program, and this year there was none, which was really good. Great. Okay. Under general business, the correspondence from Mr. Coatsier, or the Mayor of Georgian Bay. Even though we have written our concerns about this in the past, I see that Transport Canada is still refusing to change the designation of a vessel. And this remains to be problematic. And this is a problem that is going to, rise more and more here in Algonquin Highlands. So I'm wondering about council's appetite to write another letter of support. Seeing nods. Okay. So yes, administration would prepare something on that. That'd be great. Do you need a resolution? Okay. Do I have a mover and a seconder then? Councilors Barry and Richards.
Moved by Councilor Barry, seconded by Councilor Richards. Be it resolved, Council receives correspondence from Peter Goitzer, Mayor, Township of Georgian Bay, regarding the regulation of float homes, and that council directs staff to send a letter of support.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of motion? Hearing none, was there any support for correspondence that we have on file?
None received.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the correspondence listing? Councilors Barry and Short Reed.
Moved by Councilor Barry, second by Councilor Short Reed. Be it resolved, council receives on November 16th, 2023 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? That's carried. And could I have a mover and a seconder for the approval of the bylaws? Councilor Barry and Richards.
Moved by Councilor Barry, second by Councilor Richards. Be it resolved, the following bylaws be received and read a first time. considered, read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. 2023-102 to appoint an auditor for the 2023 fiscal year. 2023-104 to authorize the execution of a consent agreement between the corporation, the Township of Algonquin Highlands, and 1455721 Ontario Inc. Bylaw 2023-105 to stop, close, and convey parts of the shore road allowance lying in front of lot 20 concession 13, geographic township of Sherburne.
All in favor? That's carried. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Councillors Short-Reed and Barry.
Moved by Councillor Short-Reed, second by Councillor Barry, be it resolved that bylaw 2023-106, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its November 16th, 2023 regular meeting, be received and read a first time, considered, read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, could I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Short-Reed and Barry.
By Councillor Short-Reed, second by Councillor Barry, be it resolved that the November 16th, 2023 regular meeting is hereby adjourned at 1:05 PM.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.